Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for being here. All right, so in compliance with Chapter 551 Open Meetings of the Texas Government Code, I call to order an information session of the Board of Trustees of the Austin Independent School District for Thursday, March 7th, 2024 at 6:02 p.m. A quorum of the board is physically present at AISD Central Office to conduct this meeting. This meeting is streaming live on AISD TV and Apple TV. It's also being broadcast on cable channel 22 through Spectrum, Astound Broadband, and on channel 99 through AT&T Uverse. Closed captioning in English is available on these platforms for individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. All right, so next is an opportunity for the public to share comments with the board. This time allows speakers to comment publicly on any topic of their choosing directly to the school board. So we have time for up to 60 speakers. And as a reminder, the district continues to provide time during the regular voting meetings of the board to hear from the public about agenda items for consideration and vote. This is an opportunity for the board to take part in listening to our community. While we wish we could respond or provide feedback, we are required to limit our questions to requests for clarification or follow up directly to the administration. Members of the public wishing to participate in the public comment portion of our meeting called a dedicated AISD phone line in advance of the meeting to audio record their remarks. So we will now play the recorded messages for public comments, so please listen carefully.
Hi, my name is Allison McKenna. I've heard Mr. Segura proclaim to be a proud product of AISD and often wonder why I haven't had that same educational experience. Then I realized it's because I am a special education student. You report that special education is improving. That hasn't been my personal experience. Instead of working towards creating a climate of acceptance and inclusion, teaching staff that accommodations create a level playing field, the culture at my campus encourages a mentality that accommodations give students with a disability an unfair advantage, that SPED students don't deserve their supports, and students are publicly shamed for needing accommodations. AISD's agreed upon order with TEA calls for the district to include failure to comply with special education requirements as a reason for non-renewal and require that special education criteria be added to teacher and principal personnel evaluations. Due to the repeated failures to comply with SPED requirements at my campus, I'm requesting that the district enforce the new non-renewal policy of those involved in denying my special education supports, including the campus principal. Thank you.
Hi, this is Kim Betty Ancilla. I have been a speech therapist in AISD for 26 years. We all know that the cost of living in the Austin area has risen pretty substantially. We also know that this is a factor that our educators take into consideration when looking at their job opportunities. As a result, our district is having to rely more and more on contractors, specifically within the special education department. My understanding is that the contractors are actually going to be paid substantially more compared with AISD employees. I would like to request that the school board, as well as the community, receive a presentation regarding the cost differential between an employee, an AISD employee, and a contractor for speech therapist positions, school psychologist positions, and occupational therapist positions. I think that would do a lot to inform everyone. Thank you so much for your time.
Good evening, Board of Trustees and Superintendent Segura. My name is Vincent Tovar. I'm a proud Eastside parent. I'm calling today to oppose the Eastside Panthers' name being replaced at the Eastside CAC meeting on March 20th. An agenda item scheduled to be voted on that was not generated by Eastside students, parents, staff, community members, and would erase the school's history, whose timeline starts in 2007 with having the name Johnston refurbished to Eastside. In 2011, IDEA wanting to take over Eastside and the name. In 2012, after we kicked IDEA out, the state wanted to close Eastside in 2013. We saved it from closure in 2015. Later, AISD added Early College High School into the name. In 2021, Eastside got its new building moved and had Memorial removed from the name, added the original Anderson campus to the name. This is all after we got the new building in the 2017 bond. In 2022, AISD removed International High School. Trustees, I ask that you please direct Superintendent Segura to prevent a possible March 20th Eastside CAC name change vote, since it absolutely dishonors our already disrespected Eastside community. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jamie Haynes. I live in the Eastside Memorial Vertical Team, former soccer coach at Eastside and former longtime special ed teacher at Martin Middle School. I want to begin by thanking Austin ISD, superintendent, trustees for keeping true public education alive in Texas despite all the attacks. We fought long and hard and dealt with numerous changes over the years to Johnston, to Eastside, with name changes, and one of the unifying points that we have is our mascot, the paws up, chant that we used when we were opposing the kind of the handover to IDEA, supposedly public charter school. And we worked really hard, and that sense of community, that sense of identity is alive and well in Panther Pride. I was just at the HEB on 7th Street, and I saw somebody with a hat, and I immediately felt connected to that person. I know that there's a lot of scars for Johnston alumni, Anderson alumni, because of the erasure that's occurred. But I don't want to pass that erasure on to the next generation. The Eastside mascot and name is a.
Hi, my name is Cindy St. John, and I am a parent of Austin ISD students. I'm commenting with some questions to try to understand Title I funding. My questions are: how does Austin ISD decide the percentage of economically disadvantaged students for Title I funding eligibility? What factors contribute to that decision? When is that information released for the following year? And when a school is labeled eligible but not served, what does that label mean? I appreciate your time and your attention to these questions. Thank you.
My name is Emily Hirsch. I am the librarian at Navarro Early College High School, calling to ask you to support your AISD libraries in your budget this year. You can do that by making a job for Chromebook device managers and take that responsibility off of librarians so librarians can do actual library work instead, and by reinstating a book budget for libraries that was taken out of the budget completely last year, knocked down to zero, when TEA says an acceptable library program would give libraries the number of students multiplied by the replacement cost of a book, which is about $20. So $20 times the number of students would be just an acceptable amount of money to give. And last year, AISD required $0. So please support your very, very important libraries. It is an equity issue for sure. Much appreciated.
Hi, my name is Tara Bowman. I'm a proud librarian at Lamar Middle School in AISD, and I also have 3 students in Austin ISD. I was calling to make a comment about libraries and librarians. First, I request that each campus have a dedicated device manager and not the librarian or anybody else. It should be someone whose work is dedicated to managing devices now that we are one-to-one. Second, I would like for campuses that have over maybe 700 or 800 students to be required to have a library clerk at least part-time because of the difficulty of maintaining a collection with a large number of students. And third, could we make sure that campus budgets absolutely have something that is not zero for reading materials? That's never happened to me. I've always gotten a budget. However, I know that it has happened to some librarians, and if we're going to promote and support literacy, the library needs new reading materials. Thank you guys so much. Bye-bye.
Hi, my name is Kathy Olson. I'm the librarian at Pillow Elementary. I wanted to give some comments and suggestions for AISD's budget for next year. As a librarian and device manager, I feel like since I am on a rotation schedule, we really need a designated device manager for that job because it does take a lot of work. And I feel like we need more budget for schools, libraries to update the collection, especially for nonfiction. My age is 2006, and ALA recommends 7 to 10 years of average date for a library collection. So my collection for nonfiction is really old, and I just feel like those are the main things that I'd like to have my input taken so that we can help with our schools for next year. All right, thanks so much for listening, and I hope these are taken into consideration for next year's budget. Thanks. Bye.
Hello, Board. I'd like to mention 3 things: reading intervention at the primary level, a center or a central place where they would make Zoom calls and specialists could offer support for our families and students who need a lot of reading intervention and reading support and practice. Second, in discipline, we need a component where parents are given support in how to connect with their children and help with discipline. And third, device managers and technology in the district. We need allocated folks at each campus that will be the technology specialists. It should not fall as a second role for anyone already doing a full-time position. People looking for jobs in the district will see this as an equity issue, and it will not attract the best applicants if it is known that they will have multiple roles at one school versus in another school not having the same.
Hi, my name is Shelby Counts. I'm the librarian at Anderson High School. I would like to talk and discuss the need for dedicated device managers who aren't librarians or any other job position, but whose job is simply to be a device manager because we are a one-to-one district. We also have a need for clerks, library clerks in our school libraries, especially schools that have over 700, 800 students, because collection management is difficult when you have so many students. There also needs to be re-added to the budget the requirement that principals add money for a reading materials budget. Without that requirement, some school libraries were actually given $0. And if we support literacy, which we do, we must support school libraries having quality books and a quality library collection. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Claudia Gibson. I'm in my 14th year as a high school librarian at Austin ISD. I'm calling because I am hoping that in next year's budget, the board seriously considers having an independent device management team. Right now, it is put on the backs of mostly librarians as an extra duty as assigned, and this is another full-time job on top of my full-time job as a librarian for over 1,400 students, period. I'm also being asked to, my clerk was eliminated about 4 years ago, and I'm supposed to have a clerk in my library. That position was moved elsewhere in the school. So I'm asking that every school over a certain amount be required to have a clerk in their library so us librarians can teach and can assist students and staff with materials and instruction. And it's just really most important that we fund our libraries and also do not make the librarians device managers any longer and have a dedicated team for that, maybe for a vertical school team. Thank you so much.
Okay, so this concludes public comment. Trustees, are there any questions or clarifications? All right, well, thank you. So as a reminder, please feel free to share any general comments or questions with the board by email at trustees@austinisd.org. So next we have the President's Report. So the board is continuing our engagement with the community around the district scorecard. We invite the community to share their ideas about the district's vision and values to guide the development of the district scorecard. Our survey will remain open through Sunday, March 17th. We really appreciate all the folks that have come out and participated both in the face-to-face sessions and the online survey. So more information on the meetings and an online thought exchange survey can be found on our website at www.austinisd.org/board/scorecard-engagement. Or if you're like me, you can just Google Austin ISD Board Community Engagement or some combination of that, and it'll get you to the right place. Yes. I also wanted to mention that National Athletic Training Month is held every March in order to spread awareness about the important work of athletic trainers. And as you may recall, the board made an investment in athletic trainers for every single high school last budget cycle. Thank you, Ophelia Zapata, Trustee Zapata, for making that suggestion to ensure the safety of our student athletes. So we really appreciate our athletic trainers. Thanks so much. All right. Our next item is part of our commitment to discuss student achievement, and we have a presentation on scorecard goal 3, CCMR, and GPM 3.1, which is the TSI criteria. We're going to hear all about what all those acronyms mean in a few minutes. Before we hear our presentation, we as a board do need to confirm that our monitoring report is complete. So does any trustee have evidence that the elements of an effective monitoring report are not present? Okay. Excellent. Since everyone agrees that the required elements are present, we will turn the floor to Superintendent Segura for the presentation.
Thank you, President Singh. We're very happy to present on this item. We'll be bringing up the slide deck here, as you can see. So with me today we have Patricia Rodriguez, Deputy Superintendent of Teaching, Learning, and Leading. We have Dr. Wilson, Assistant Superintendent of Secondary Schools. We have Dr. Creslin Fannin, Executive Director of Early College High School and PTech, and then Dylan Feenan, Director of Campus District and Accountability. And so as we move to slide 2, we clearly lay out the goal, which is the percent of graduates that meet the TSI criteria on the TSIA 2/ACT and SAT and either earn an IBC Level 1 certificate, Level 2 certificate, or earn an associate's degree will increase from 7.5% in August of 2021 to 10% in August of 2026. Today, we will be presenting on Goal Progress Measure 3.1. Of note, there are 3 additional goal progress measures, and we'll be presenting on those at the upcoming board meeting. But this one specifically is around Goal Progress Measure 3.1. Students who have completed TSI in both ELA and math will increase from 52% in August of 2021 to 72% by August of 2026. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Dr. Fannin to take us through the next couple slides.
Thank you, Superintendent Segura, Board President Arati Singh, and thank you for the board for having us here today. So as you know, historically, we typically talk to you a little bit about our data with TSI, and it's 2 years lag. We bring you our data from the AccuPlacer, from TEA, from Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. All of that data that we're bringing to you, it typically is in the past and is 2 years old. Tonight, we're really going to focus in on bringing you some data from the Texas Success Initiative that is our current data, what's happening right now with our seniors who are sitting in our classrooms right now. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about those acronyms. The TSI is the Texas Success Initiative, which is that in a whole. It encompasses the Texas Success Initiative Assessment 2, which is the exam, as well as the SAT and ACT. And so that's a combination of those assessments that help us to deem our students TSI ready. And so what that means in layman's terms is that our students are able to take those dual credit courses in college. They're able to enter right into their colleges or universities ready to take those college level classes. And so these assessments, they also provide our school districts with the opportunity for them to ensure that they're meeting our CCMR accountability and our CCMR outcomes bonus funding. The TSIA 2 exam, that begins in the spring semester of our 8th grade year. And what many people don't know is that that exam actually lasts for up to 5 years. So right here in Austin ISD, our high schools, we give the TSIA 2 approximately about 3 times a year. We also offer the SAT school day digitally here for all of our high school juniors. And we actually just did that this semester. We did this on Tuesday, actually, at all of our juniors at our high schools. Our seniors and our juniors are also able to take the SAT and ACT exams on various other campuses. They do that nationwide where you're offering that exam right on your campuses at your high schools. So I want to also focus in a little bit on what the research says on this slide. I want to focus a little bit on this. Let me pull this microphone up so you can make sure you hear this research. From E3 Alliance, it talks about the pathways to prosperity. It states that young adults without a post-secondary credential within 6 years of leaving high school have just a 12% chance of earning a living wage. And that's great data for us to hear. 12% have a chance of earning a living wage within 6 years of leaving our high school. It really focuses in on why we do what we do. It focuses in on why is this TSI so important? because we want our scholars to be prepared for what's going to happen after they leave us in Austin ISD. We want them to be prepared to earn a living wage. More research states from Accelerate Ed Education Strategy Group. Now, this is supported by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. What they shared is that 2/3 of today's jobs require education and training beyond high school, making post-secondary credentials a prerequisite to achieving greater economic prosperity and social mobility. And that right there is exactly our why. That's why the TSI is so important. That's the why behind what we do, and why we're focusing in our energies on making sure that our students are prepared. And we're going to take you on a journey tonight on this data. And so I wanted to share a little bit more about what we're doing tonight. Goal 3, it monitors the achievement for our 12th graders meeting this TSI criteria, earning an industry-based certification, level 1 or level 2 certificate, or an associate degree. And we do that by monitoring this goal progress measure through 3.1 that you'll see here. We're going to come back to you and talk to you a little bit about 3.2, 3.3, and 3.4, like our superintendent shared with you on March the 28th. So our next slide here, it talks about the 3 categories where our CCMR accountability actually occurs, what those indicators are. I want to focus in on this first column of college readiness. This category really pinpoints where our students need to focus in for the TSI criteria. On the next slide, what you'll see is our goal progress measures for 3.1. And when our scholars meet this TSI criteria, this is where they're deemed ready and successful to enter into their college level courses. So that's what we're going to be sharing with you tonight, more data and do a deeper dive there. It talks about how they're deemed ready for their college level courses. They're able to take those freshman level English and math courses such as English 1301 and English 1302. They're able to take Math 1314, which is our college algebra courses. We want them to be prepared to go straight into those classes without taking any developmental courses. So Dylan is going to walk us a little bit through some data and do a deeper dive. I'll come back and talk to you a little bit about the key takeaways.
Thank you, Dr. Fenn. This table summarizes the percentage of 12th grade students that have met TSI criteria by academic year going back to 2021. For previous years, the values represent the percentage of students that met TSI criteria at the end of that given school year. For school year 23-24, we see that 51.7% of students have met TSI criteria by February of this year. In February of 22-23, which was last school year, we had 43.55% of seniors who had met TSI criteria, and by the end of last school year, that increased to 53%. That's a 9 percentage point increase from February to the end of last school year. If we see similar trends to this in this academic school year, we are on track to meet and possibly exceed our end of the year goal of 56%. In this next slide, we will look specifically at the progress monitoring data for GPM 3.1 for school year 23-24. 51.7% of seniors have met TSI criteria in English language arts and mathematics as of February of this year. AISD is 4.3 percentage points shy of our goal, which is 56%, and that equates to approximately 190 students. Now, while we're on track to meet our goal, we do know that we're not on track to meet our goal for all students across AISD. There are certain underserved groups that are not on track to meet this goal. 12th grade Black and Hispanic students are underperforming in TSI criteria compared to other student groups. Another student group that is not on track would be students experiencing poverty. 12th grade students experiencing poverty of all races except Asian are underperforming in TSI criteria as well. With that, I'm going to hand the key takeaways over to Dr. Fannin.
Thank you. Alrighty, so let's focus in on some key takeaways. Here's what we know. What we know is that our Black and our brown students, they are underperforming. And we know that we have a lot of work to do. And this also includes our economically disadvantaged students as well as our emerging bilingual students as well. and we still know that we have a lot of work to do. If you take a look at the data, we understand that we have to look at it from a different lens. Previously, we've been looking at this from a holistic level. And now what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're looking at this where we're drilling down and taking a look at the disaggregated data to really focus in on some intentional interventions. And those intentional interventions have to be specific for the student groups that we just shared. We know that we have some work to do. We know that we've got to come together with our other departments and really get in there and talk about some strategies that we can do that will help our students to endure through this journey of college and career readiness. So I want to take a look at some of the root causes for this TSI criteria. When I look at that as it relates to case management in this pink square that you see here, what I'm going to share is that we're actually just not able to see what we need to see. And what that means for us is it's key that we're going to have, that we need a student level management tool. That tool that's going to allow us to see what is happening 8th through 12th grade while the students are in 8th through 12th grade. We need to see what's going on with our students while they're in those certain grade levels so that we can take a look at where do we go in and where do we do those intentional interventions with those different student groups. Also regarding this misalignment of the test, the root cause here is that we're testing students too late, to be honest. We're waiting until the senior year to test them, and we need to really make sure that we're offering this assessment to them when they are ready to take the test, when they have acquired the knowledge. The next root cause that we have here is really regarding our curriculum resources. They're very limited and they're misaligned. What we know is that we're teaching one thing and then we're testing on something different. And we've got to get that alignment just right for our students. Lastly, what we see is the deficits of K-12 literacy. And our students, they're just not getting those fundamental pieces in math and in literacy. It goes back to MTSS and some of the things that we're tackling now and making sure, again, that they're prepared for this journey, that we're trying to make sure that they have every opportunity to be successful beyond Austin ISD. So I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Rodriguez, our amazing Deputy Superintendent, and she's going to present to you some strategies on how we're tackling these root causes as it relates to
Thank you, Dr. Fannin. So Teaching, Learning, and Leading has identified 4 strategies to address our root causes. And just as Dr. Fannin has already stated, we really want to ensure that we are providing early intervention for all of our students. And having a case management system will allow us to do that. Not only will it support our teachers and our leaders to accurately track students, but it also helps us to equitably resource early intervention programs, our individualized counseling, and even targeted tutoring to students. We know the importance of early identification, so currently we are focusing on our 8th graders. And this will be the first year that CCMR will coordinate its efforts to provide TSIA2 testing to all of our middle schools in May of 2024. So providing access really starts with having a curriculum that's aligned and that really encompasses our CCMR vision and our goals. So through the support of our board, last year, our K through 8 curriculum went through a redesign, and that was last summer. So for the summer of 2024, our secondary academics team, in partnership with CCMR, will collaborate in the review and the redesign of our high school curriculum. And we really want to embed those opportunities for our master prep. And also, we want to strengthen our Tier 1 instruction towards college readiness. Strengthening internal and external partnerships is also a focus that will help us address our root causes. Our current organizational structure within Teaching, Learning, and Leading has really created that space for academics, special education, school leadership, CTE, and CCMR to partner in the work. And this partnership has created a true alignment, not only in our support to our campuses, but also in one message and one vision. Our departments continue to collaborate so that they are developing really quality campus professional development for our leaders, and that they're also monitoring those campus action plans for our 12th graders. The team also continues to explore how to maximize our master scheduling in order to provide the most opportunities for all of our students. So I think it was in October, we presented a potential opportunity that focused on our African American and Hispanic students. So thanks to your support, we have partnered with a Male Student Achievement Program. And although this program is fairly new to our campuses, we are really excited for the opportunities, and we know that it will bring positive impacts to our work. And so I will pass it on to Dr. Wilson now to give us a little bit more details on our strategy.
Thank you. So you'll notice some overlap on this slide from some of the content you've seen in previous slides, and that is because many of our strategies are in partnership and collaboration with other departments this school year. We are working to increase the number of students who are trending towards college readiness in math and ELA, and the goal is to eventually have less items that appear in the design and refine column, which is the first column, as we move towards sustainable systems and processes to monitor. So in this first stage, the design stage, the first few items that appear in this column began at the start of this school year. We organized and realigned our secondary school leadership weekly meetings to include all teams that impact secondary outcomes. This is inclusive of the Office of Academics, secondary school leadership executive directors, and our college readiness teams, both CCMR and CTE. Professional development has also been integrated into our monthly principals meetings by level. And this spring, we started something new thanks to the wonderful feedback of our middle school and high school principals. We have designed a separate learning opportunity aside from our monthly principals meeting cadences to engage with principals in what we call Principal PLC. We have middle school Principal PLC and high school Principal PLC that meets once a month at different campuses, and we engage in best practices together. The principals totally lead the learning and design the work for these sessions. What we have found is that we've made these sessions optional. And so far, we've had 100% attendance from all of our middle school principals and also from our high school principals. We find that when we make things optional, everyone attends. And when they find that the learning is also valuable and meaningful to them, and they can take that learning and readily apply it. So we have novice principals learning from experienced principals, and then our veteran principals are also learning from our novice principals. In our last session, principals reviewed campus-specific goals for progress monitoring of data of secondary outcomes, inclusive of CCMR. The final 3 bullets under our design stage communicate our future plans for strategic support and alignment by operationalizing other departments in the work. Future Ready Grads is a collaborative work session that will expand our reach to include our counseling department. Our principals have asked for more alignment and more collaboration, as our counselors play a significant role in advising our students and helping to prepare them for college, career, and beyond. And the other 2 things we've already talked about. We're in the final stages of obtaining a centralized data management system. I want to reiterate that because I do want to thank Superintendent Segura. This has been years in the making, and our principals are excited that their voices have been elevated and that we are responding to what they are seeing and saying at the campus level. In column 2, for the refined stage, we've tweaked many of our processes this year to prioritize student and campus needs as a system of schools and also individually for deeper levels of coaching and support. We also partner with our multilingual education team to optimize coordinated supports with resources and methods of instruction so that we can support teachers in making academic language comprehensible for our students who are identified as emergent bilingual. And lastly, in our final stage, in the monitoring stage, we are committed to providing sustainable systems that lead to predictable outcomes. This happens in the monitoring stage because progress monitoring is key as it signals to us when to make adjustments, when to maintain, when to refine, and we triangulate using several data points, and we regularly solicit feedback from our school leaders and teams. Building strong school community partnerships is also critical in this stage in preparing our students for college, career, and beyond. And then in our final slide, this concludes our presentation for Goal Progress Measure 3.1 TSI criteria. We will continue to work in providing access and opportunities for our scholars to be college ready in math and ELA upon graduation, and refining our systems to ensure that we are sustaining this goal for all students.
All right, thank you. Really appreciate the information presented. All right, so we will now open the floor for our monitoring conversation. So as a reminder, we have asked questions that are of a technical or tactical nature before tonight's meeting, and those questions and their answers are posted with the agenda materials for the public to see, and you will find these at austinisd.org/board/meetings. Our questions during the meeting will be of a strategic nature, meaning we will ask questions that help us understand how the reality for our students is aligning with our vision. Many of you may recall, trustees, this purple sheet, and I believe Dr. Reach just emailed us a digital version of this to help guide us through our questions so that they are strategic in nature per LSG guidelines. So let's see. Which side should I start with? I don't know, Andrew. I made eye contact with you, so let's start with Trustee Gonzalez.
I did go first last time, but that's
Oh,
okay.
sorry. I'll switch it up.
It's okay. You all mentioned that currently we are at 51.7%, and that at this point last year we were at 43, and I believe you said 56 is where we're projected to end. Are there certain strategies that you attribute that difference to?
Absolutely. I think it's us being more intentional, watching the work, making sure that we're working with our seniors to see how many of them have participated in the TSI since 8th grade. How many of them have taken an SAT or an ACT, and taking a look at what were their super scores. Previously, we really haven't had the opportunity to do that because of the data. It's been 2 years lag. In addition to that, we don't have a student level management tool that allows us to do that. So we're using our Google Sheets. Every time that we have a new staff member, we're trying to pull some of that old data from the person that leaves that informs us what happened last year and the year before and the year before. And so it's going to be key for us in order to get to that and to exceed that. That's our goal. But it's going to be key for us to be able to triage and find that 190 students that Dylan talked about. We're going to need to drill down and make sure that we find them and work with all of our students to make sure that they have what they need to be successful. But I think it really comes down into being intentional and spending long nights looking at the data and pulling that.
Thank you. The other question I have is in the appendix. I don't think that it was in the main slideshow, but when I look at page 17, I see a decline in the completion for 12th grade students that are identified as emergent bilingual, and similarly for African American students that are economically disadvantaged. Can you talk about, I know you reviewed the root causes generally, but maybe for those particular student groups, if there's anything that you could add.
What I'll add is that especially with our emergent bilingual students and those who have some of those accommodations, what we're seeing is that they don't have access to those. It's not allowed on the TSI exam. So for instance, a dictionary, those are things that are not allowed for them to utilize on that exam. And so what we're seeing is on some of their other exams, they do have access to that. So it does make a difference in how well that they're going through the exam by not having all of the accommodations and resources that they would normally have. And also what we see is that when those deficiencies in the beginning and intermediate levels for English proficiency, it's the same barrier to this same exam. The same things that we're seeing in TELPAS, same things that we're seeing in the TSI as well. You want to add on or anything?
Yeah, so what we've noticed as we walk classrooms and our executive director team in collaboration with so many other departments, providing on-the-spot, job-embedded professional development to our principals and our campus leadership teams, is in our classrooms, we're noticing it's a very interesting dynamic of the verbal minority versus the silent majority. And what we've noticed is if you look into the classrooms, the outliers are the verbal majority. The silent majority is comprised of many of our Black and Brown students. And so we're working to increase reading, writing, listening, and speaking, those 4 domains across content areas within the classroom in order to provide our students with more access and more opportunities to apply themselves and to apply their knowledge in different ways.
So one thing I think is important that we share, it didn't come across, and I probably know why, and that's because we're now engaging with ACC to really understand how TSI impacts all of our students and what this transition into ACC might look like. And, we've had conversations with them, we recognize that as we plan out the scorecard as well as the goal progress measures, we feel there's a real opportunity to almost have like a shared goal. And TSI has come up in many of those conversations. We're expected to have a work session with ACC and the Chancellor right after spring break. So I just wanted y'all to know that we recognize that, yes, this is one goal progress measure, but the overall issues and concerns that we have are really shared by both ACC, AISD, and other partners around Central Texas and elsewhere.
Thank you for adding on to that. There was really big news from ACC not too long ago about promises regarding free tuition. And so to know that this is a barrier to that and that we're in conversation with them about reducing it is very good to hear. So
yeah, Dr. Larhart, we've met 2 or 3 times in the last 2 or 3 months. So yeah, this is very, very close to us, and I think we really have an opportunity as we rebuild up the scorecard. I envision almost a time where I'm going, to present to the ACC board on the students that may be going to ACC and some of the barriers that we've identified, and then conversely, he would perhaps be coming here to talk about how we can adjust our practices to ensure that those students have that opportunity. Because right now, only 11% of our students actually go into ACC, and that's been declining over the last many years. So definitely an opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Kaufman? Okay. Trustee Hunter?
I don't have any questions at this time. I would like to thank Trustee Boswell for question 10, which can be found in the backup for the public, and Trustee Kaufman for expanding on it. Thank you.
All right. I have a couple of questions. So one question is, again, looking at that table, slide 17 of the appendix, actually. Excuse me. So I wanted to confirm, it is very helpful to see the historical data. And as I'm going through this, as my colleague pointed out, there are some declines from last year, but I wanted to confirm my understanding of what I'm seeing here. And I'm sorry I didn't catch this earlier, but for our Black students in 22-23, so last year we had 20% who are completing the TSI, and then this year it's 26. So that is the actual data.
Yes, so at the end of last year, we had 20% completed TSI, and then by February of this year, we had 26% that have completed TSI.
Okay.
So 23, the furthest column that's clear or not filled in is 23-24, but as of February.
As of February.
Correct.
Okay. So is it then correct to say that we've had a 6-point increase?
Yes.
So far.
Okay, for
And
African.
that will likely go up before the end of the year as well. We predict that will go up before the end of the year.
Okay, okay. Well, that's helpful context, and I also see for Hispanic students there's a slight increase there as well. So I think that is helpful and a testimony to some of the work that you all have been doing. You had mentioned the data systems, Dr. Fannin, and my understanding is that those will be up and ready like in the next school year. Is that correct?
We're looking forward to that.
Okay.
I
Okay.
am hopeful. I'm looking at my superintendent like, I am hopeful that is what we're going to get.
Okay. And I know that's a yes or no question, but really what I'm getting to is how might this show up in our budget?
Oh, yeah. So we've had that conversation, and I told the team, we need to be very clear with the trustees as to how it might find itself in the budget. We recognize that it would be a software cost, and those typically, though they're owned by, in this case, Dr. Fannin's office, they will actually fall under our Chief of Technology, Oscar Rodriguez's BTO, our budget. And so, yes, we'll be having that as an identified expense. We've already been talking about it, and we expect to have that move forward. So,
okay, great, that's exciting. The other question I had was around the data. I'm always going to be curious about the outliers and if there were specific I guess if you could explain some of the characteristics of the schools, not of the students, but the actual school campuses, where we saw Black and Hispanic economically disadvantaged students doing well. Do we have, I don't know if there's anything that you might be able to share to shed light on our theory of action and help give a little bit more light to that.
For the actual specific schools, I would have to get back to you with that data. I don't want to misspeak for numbers purposes with that.
I will say that one of the things that we've observed is that there's a close connection to the middle schools. And so those schools where we observe challenges with the middle school, we're seeing that kind of reflected in the students prepared to start their journey and ultimately be successful in a TSI. So we definitely see that correlation. And so, it's definitely a system issue that we're having to address.
Okay. Thank you. Those are all my questions. Trustee Zapata, do you have any questions?
Yes. So, in your strategies, has there been thought, could you explain more about how you see the partnerships with ACC, and Workforce Solutions? What are the strategies to help our students to be ready and prepared for after they leave AISD?
So we're working with our college access partners to ensure that our students have a direct connect with our partners. We host our family nights with our AVID team and our Gear Up team led by Dr. Severance. We also have our Tools for Success working in partnership with ACC. Our counselors, our college advisors, the whole team, we all meet with ACC to ensure that we have a direct connection with their success team there. Their academic success specialists actually come to our campuses and work with our students who are engaged in dual credit. They do a midterm check-in with those students, really digging deep into see where they are in the semester, as well as making sure that they're following throughout the school year. Other partners such as Comi Madre, Breakthrough, all of them, they really are helpful working with us and our students. We meet on a monthly basis to ensure that we're in alignment with our scorecard goal. Each month they give us a report by the 5th of the month to share some of their goals, to share some of their accolades and the great things that they're doing, and also sharing with us where their challenges and barriers are so that we can come together and make sure that we're working together on the same page.
Were some of those challenges and noted somewhere that helps to get to the root cause?
A lot of it kind of boiled down to the student management tool. Each of those entities have their own tool that they're utilizing, but they want to tap into the work that we're doing from 8th through 12th grade. They're unable to do that because we don't have a student management tool. But we're working with them individually on each of our campuses to make sure that we're sharing that data. When they become a part of our campus, they do a DSA, a data sharing agreement with us, so we're able to share that data and making sure that they have access to it as well.
Okay, great.
Yes,
great.
ma'am.
I didn't hear on the strategies, and I'm just curious about the internships. Because, students learn there's 7 multiple intelligence, right, of how students learn. So is that part of the strategy as well? I'm just curious.
Well, we're going to be working with our students this summer. We have our Summer Bridge. We also have our Summer Melt Initiative, and then we have our Summer Youth Engagement Employment Program as well. So all of them will have the opportunity to engage in college and career readiness activities that's going to help them be prepared for this journey. So we're excited to make sure that those students that engage in SYEP also have the same opportunities.
Excellent.
Yes, ma'am.
I think that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Trustee Zapata, just to follow up, and I do want to also kind of reinforce other opportunities that we're exploring along with the Chamber. Certainly, the opportunities that exist with the Summer Youth Program, we are fully supporting that and doing whatever we can to ensure students have those opportunities. but we're also identifying partners through the chamber that can provide additional opportunities for students that may seek different experiences. And so we've had those conversations. They'll continue to progress. And I think before we get too far along, we'll be able to present perhaps a modified or maybe additive opportunity as well.
Excellent. Well, because my experience, and I've heard from parents, the internships are great. They like it, but the students don't get a stipend for it. And sometimes, they have to quit their dream job to go help the family. And so whatever we do with our partnerships, that we ask, to pay a stipend so our kids can be motivated to stay in that track. Because, it is real, and that's something I think that would also increase their interest because they know they're going to get a check,
Yeah, and I think one thing that we're doing is ensuring that this process is a lot more efficient. I think the challenges we have in the past is when we're kind of coordinating with multiple owners or managers of companies. This way, by using the partners that we have through the summer youth program, but also with the chamber, we have kind of one access point, and then they, as a consortium, can go and pull different opportunities across multiple partners. So I think that's really going to help us kind of define the opportunity a lot clearer earlier and not kind of get mired down in the back and forth sometimes that's required to get this across the finish line. So pretty excited about that.
Thank you. Trustee Whitley-Chu.
Great, thank you. And I just want to ask a clarifying question before I go to my other question. So for GPM 3.1, when we are referring to students who have completed TSI, are we referring to students who have completed TSI criteria? Would that be all inclusive of meeting that, like an ACT?
SAT, ACT, and the TSIA too.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So I would like to know, what do we see that is working, or what are you seeing that's working that should be continued or expanded on?
Starting earlier, like we shared tonight, working with our middle school campuses, we're seeing that if we start early with making sure that they have an opportunity to even participate in that exam and being prepared. I think that's the second thing. Making sure that we're working with our teachers to align the curriculum that's happening in the classrooms, making sure that what we're actually testing them on, we're making sure that that's in the classrooms and happening with those teachers, and they have the resources and the tools that they need to be able to do that as well. But starting early also definitely has seen many gains, as well as making sure that all of our students have access and have the opportunity to see the exam, practice the exam, and then take the exam.
And is that the TSI exam specifically, or
but also
pre-SATs
SAT
or
as well.
Okay.
We also have some resources for that. In some of our campuses, they take a look at what they can do inside their classrooms and aligning those TEKs to make sure that they're looking at that criteria, looking at that curriculum to see where does it align in this math class, where does it align in the English class, and making sure that we're preparing them for that as well.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, were you about to say something? Oh,
No,
okay.
no,
All right. So we'll just go one more round. Trustee Kaufman.
So thank you again for all the information about this topic. I did want to kind of understand the root cause of this a little more in terms of what role the family members, parents and guardians play in this data. And so I'm curious whether AISD communicates or how we communicate to students, legal guardians, the TSI criteria, the implications of meeting or not meeting those criteria, their students' current status on meeting those criteria, and what family members can do to support their students in meeting the criteria. Absolutely. So in short, like as a parent, should I know right now whether my junior in high school has met these criteria?
Absolutely. And so one thing that we're doing is we're making sure that we are having our family nights across the district. beginning as early as middle school and high school. We're engaged in working with our counseling department, working with advanced academics to make sure that we're sharing this information with them. I think it's also helpful with our parent support specialists. We have a wonderful team there that we've actually shared what does the TSI look like, making sure that they're able to engage with the parents. When they go out to families and speaking to them, they have that knowledge as well. And we really are excited about the work that we're doing in student services, working with Dr. Gloria Williams' team, making sure that the counseling team, the SEL team, the counselors, the parent support specialists, all those that are with student services actually have this information. We also did some work with our communications department, making sure that they have that information as well.
And so, again, short, as a parent of a junior, I should know this information. I should be aware of what the criteria are that my child, what their, according to their academic plan, what the criteria is that my child is expected to meet on this. Because I guess I ask because I don't have that information as a parent, or I don't recall ever hearing that. And so I'm curious, as a relatively privileged, involved parent, then I kind of wonder whether that's an area of root cause if some of our families who may not be as connected to the education scene, whether they have the knowledge of how important this is for their child and whether they kind of are aware of where their child stands and what they can do to help.
Yeah, and that is also an opportunity for improvement. So across all campuses, the communication may vary or look differently. For some campuses, the students are, they're organized within communities. And so within those specific houses or academies, so to speak, that communication would come vertically through that academy, and there is like an assistant principal or a designated school personnel that is with that academy that sends out that communication. For some, students may not even be aware that they already have obtained their CCMR point that they need, just to be completely transparent, because there are several different areas or strands and where you can get an indicator to get a point to be CCMR ready. Our campus leadership teams are tracking this information strategically in their own Google spreadsheets right now. However, the communication standpoint, we could increase that communication to ensure that parents are aware of that. I do know that students also meet, but this is at the senior level, with their counselors, admin, and a team of people in those individual graduation committees. And they meet regularly to look at their checkpoints, to see where they currently stand, and then to make adjustments to ensure that they are able to graduate and walk across the stage. That's one point. However, if your child, some students enter and they may have already met that criteria or obtained that point their 9th grade year, not necessarily sure if that communication would still be given to the parent their 10th, 11th, or 12th grade year. Right now, our focus has been on students who have not obtained the point, but there is work to be done on just making this education and this information accessible to all.
Okay. Thank you. And then I have a question on the accountability indicators. When the career ready, I'm on slide, I don't know, this one. And it has under the accountability indicators that one of the options is for graduates with a completed IEP and workforce readiness. And I'm just wondering, based on some questions or concerns I've heard from the community, whether we as a district are really actively pushing for students to have full access to the whole range of options available to them and not necessarily prematurely pushing kids into a career track that may have a lower expectation for what their academic skills are, if that makes sense. Like, are we looking at the data, particularly for kids who are being served in special education, to ensure that those decisions are being made individually for those students and that the supports are being provided to push them towards the track that they want to, they and their families want for their careers, and not being pushed into a track that might put them into a category of a criteria that may set a limited set of options for them as a career.
Yeah, that makes sense. Our principals have engaged in learning around that, especially I remember at the beginning of this school year, our first set of cadences for principals' learning sessions and meetings centered around that and what that individualized support looks like for students receiving special education services. And we had some very transparent, high-level conversations around students, because they're in an ARG meeting, there is an option for a student to receive credit, so to speak, through their IEP. However, that should not be a mass level decision, or it shouldn't be mass coding or a decision that's made across the campus. Those are individual conversations that happen specifically for that student with regard to their needs and inputs from all invested partners. And we ensure that this isn't a decision that's just made in solidarity, but that it's actually for the best need of the student.
That's awesome. Thank you. And just similarly, and I think I'm going to shift into like moving forward, looking forward. When we think of some of these criteria, when an accountability system sometimes forces us into a, like, let's meet this goal rather than let's achieve at the highest level possible for all
Yes.
students. And not for lack of intent, but sometimes it just, that's the way the incentives work.
Yeah.
And so when I think of that, so specifically around the special education, when I look at the options of graduates with a completed IEP and workforce readiness, which is a great outcome, right, is an option to get the point, and graduates with an advanced degree plan and receive special education services. And so I could picture that there could be a world in which to get those 140 students that we need, we're emphasizing, let's make sure we get some students with an IEP to have a workforce readiness plan, when for those families, the goal and aspiration for that student and their families might be they want an advanced degree plan. And so just being, do we have safeguards in place to ensure, I think you answered this already, but it's part of why I'm asking this, just to make sure that we have safeguards in place to ensure that the student's individualized plan is what's driving this and not getting the box checked. I think you answered that.
Thank you for bringing that up, Trustee Kaufman. We, myself and some members of the team last summer, we attended a PLC conference that was led by Mike Meadows, who's a keynote speaker. And one of the things he said to us, gave us the charge for our focus for this school year. He mentioned that when a child walks across the stage and receives a high school diploma in your school district, it should signify something more than just completion. The key to our nation's political strength is an educated populace, and we cannot leave that to chance. And that has been our charge for this school year. We are not interested in checking the boxes for compliance reasons. We actually want to see that our students graduate, walk across the stage, and they are future ready. And with that being said, we understand and recognize that there are systemic issues, and we have to respond in a very systematic way. And so that is what we have been doing this school year, is responding very systematically to systemic issues and ensuring that students are able to be successful, and we are not checking the box to have 100% graduation rates.
Awesome. Thank you. And then I guess, go ahead.
Well, I want to reinforce, I think the collaborative conversations we're having with ACC are really meaningful here, because we're talking about changes that are beyond kind of the framework that we're operating in. And when we meet with ACC and when we met with the chancellor, we talk about how to really ensure readiness, irrespective of the tool that's being used to measure it. And there are a lot of creative things that we can do, but it's going to require kind of rethinking both ACC systems as well as AISD systems. And so I think what you're seeing here is an effort to explore it both locally, but also recognize that there's a larger opportunity here, especially with new leadership coming into ACC, and they're very eager to figure out how to remove this barrier, because I think many of us view it as a barrier. So I just wanted to let you know that conversation is critically important, because I think we're talking about beyond TSI at this point.
Okay, thank you. And then going back to one more root cause question, and this is my standard question these days, but like when a student doesn't meet the TSIA score cutoff for reading, does that mean they can't read, right? I mean, is this test truly an indicator that our kids are lacking the basic literacy that we owe them, or are there other factors that lead to students not passing the reading test?
Yeah, so there are some inherent biases with the TSI testing, and also there are some very real challenges that we are seeing, especially with our students that are identified as emergent bilingual, and also with our Black students. We are seeing some very real academic challenges in reading and math, and we have been working to attack that systematically. One of the ways is we've partnered with our academics team this year, and we have engaged in some professional learning around strategies for striving readers and mathematicians. It's a new concept that we introduced, small group instruction. You hear about it a lot at the elementary level. It's like pulling teeth at the middle school and high school level, but it actually works for all students, and students benefit from that smaller ratio of teacher to student interaction. So our focus this year at the secondary level has been to integrate small group instruction at the middle school and high school level. It looks differently. They're not sitting around the kidney table. It looks totally different, but it's totally doable, and we have seen evidence of that impact in very small incremental ways. We also are tracking our students. We noticed that we have a high concentration of student groups at certain schools. We want to ensure that we are operationalizing supports to meet the needs of that population. So with our middle schools, we have about 4,600 students that are identified as emerging bilinguals. And out of that number, 34% of that student group is concentrated at 3 particular middle schools, Dobie, Webb, and Burnett. And those 3 middle schools feed into Northeast Early College High School and Navarro Early College High School. So we are working hand in hand with our MET team to ensure that we have supports in place. And it's not just about the cultural pedagogical practices, but it's also about those methods of instruction that are high impact that really work, such as our silent strategies, our sheltered instruction strategies, incorporating visuals and multiple opportunities for students to read, write, listen, and speak across the curriculum, and ensuring that we are meeting the needs of our students. So we also have noticed at the high school level that there are 5 high schools in particular that have between 20 to 25% of students, of their emergent bilingual student population that is identified as newcomers. And that's Northeast, it's Bowie, Travis, International, and Anderson. And so we have some supports that are put into place for that as well. Trustee Singh, you asked a question and it just came to my mind. Bowie was one of our outliers for students that were identified as Black and also as emergent bilingual, for the work that's happening there with them having students that are able to be TSI ready. But we also look at the denominator too when we're thinking about that as well. So certain schools have smaller denominators, which may make them stand out as a larger success rate. So we look at all of those strategies and criteria. And then when we meet in principal PLC, we have those principals share out strategies and best practices so that we can learn. We found that when principals are teaching each other, they are more likely to take that back and apply it immediately to their campuses as opposed to us telling them what to do.
Awesome. So these are not questions anymore. These are just to kind of, you already answered these questions, so I'm just going to ask them as part of the looking forward, but you've already answered them. And so one is just, do our strategies, or actually I will ask a question to be answered in the future, which is please make sure that in the budgeting process that you're keeping the board and the budget development team informed about what is it that we truly need in our schools to ensure that our secondary schools and our high schools have the staff and skills to address those kind of gaps that you had mentioned in terms of primary reading skills that perhaps they should have learned in K through 2 or that should have been provided to them back then, but they don't have them. So high school teachers, that's not what they learn, right? So do we have does our budget create the opportunity for kids to have support with those basic foundational reading, decoding skills if they don't have those in high school? And then second question, which you've already answered, which is like in thinking forward for strategies, how are we really going to partner with parents and families as co-teachers in this work to really help them understand what role they can play in helping their students at home at that level? Because again, it's different. Reading to your 5-year-old is different from reading to your 16-year-old, but they're equally important. So how are our strategies supporting that? But you already answered that. Thank you.
All right, we have Trustee Boswell who's zooming in, and I believe she has a couple of questions for y'all.
I do. Thank you very much, President Singh, and thank you all for the presentation. I have a couple of questions about TSI, the TSI itself, and the SAT and the ACT, and the patterns that we see in campuses about who's taking which test. I would love to know a little bit more about the pattern, about what's being taken where. Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Boswell, would you mind starting over, please?
Oh, no, I don't mind at all. Thank you all for all of this. I have a question about the patterns you see in which campuses and which groups of students are taking the TSI test versus the ACT and the SAT, and what patterns you're seeing in that. that we need to be aware of?
So, Trustee Boswell, all of our juniors engage in taking the SAT on all of our campuses. So we are seeing that opportunity happening for all of our high school campuses. We do that during the school day, during our SAT school day. That happened this past Tuesday, where all of our juniors engaged in taking the SAT. And then, of course, across the board, 8th through 12th grade, all of our scholars have the opportunity to also participate in the TSIA exam. Now, also what we did was we offered the PSAT as well, and we did that this past fall, and that was open to all of our students as well, 8th grade and 9th grade students as well. So we are seeing opportunities, making sure that they're happening in different grade levels with all of our campuses.
Thank you very much. So my understanding that is that we're not, what I'm hearing you based on that data is that we're not giving these tests in a way that kind of funnels kids into one choice or another, that you really feel like we're offering these in a way that leaves the most possibilities open to every student.
I think I hear you. I think if I'm hearing you correctly, you're asking me if we're making sure that all of our students have the opportunities, and those opportunities are there for all of our students. As it relates to those trends, what we're seeing is that some of our students will fare better on the SAT once they take that and they've had a certain sequence of their math coursework. But we're making sure that we're putting in those interventions, working with the students to prepare them for that math portion. What we see is we're working through the algebra classes, Algebra 2, and then that geometry that happens at an early age as well. And so that's probably where we're seeing most of the trends that are happening is in that math section.
Okay, thank you very much. That's it for me right now.
All right. Trustee Boswell, any more questions?
No, nothing else for me right now. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And yes, that actually was Secretary Boswell. I know it didn't sound like her voice, but we appreciate her persistence. All right. So, yes, Trustee Sabata.
I just want to see, clarify, if you could clarify for me. You mentioned that at 12th grade, the student gets to meet with a team of people to see where they are in all of these things. But that happens at 12th grade. Did I hear you say that? Is that correct?
Yeah, let me clarify that. So at 12th grade, we are having specific conversations about graduation readiness, and we are progress monitoring weekly the on track to graduate percentages and numbers for to prepare for graduation. However, those conversations happen with the counselor at every grade level. So 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade, and even in our middle schools as well. Okay. I was speaking specifically to those on track to graduate numbers. I should have clarified that a little better. Okay.
All right. And as you also talked about systems, I'm glad that we're talking about systems because is part of the system would be like creating a calendar that during a certain time of each of the year, this is happening to help with our students for TSI or for SAT. Those are already in the system district-wide, right?
Yes. So we have systems district-wide, and then we also have systems at the campus level. We've worked very intentionally this school year to ensure that we are aligning those supports. So having those meetings that Dr. Fannin mentioned that her and her team have, and the executive director is also present of school leadership for those meetings with the principal. We've asked for the entire leadership team to be a part of those meetings as well. They happen quarterly. And we look at the systems, we discuss them, we refine them. They tell us where they need support, and we try to move the numbers for student achievement that way. I do want to point out that 26% of our secondary principals are within their first year of the principalship this school year, and then 53% are within the first 1 to 3 years. So over half of our secondary principal group they're a group of novice principals, and they have learned so much this school year and have been very grateful for the knowledge that's been imparted to them. So we are truly dedicating a significant amount of time to professional development and to the shared experiences of our novice and veteran principals, because we do understand that this is a new group, and so we're training, we're developing, and we're growing together.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other trustees have a question? Okay, so I have a few questions as well, and it's kind of a more global question about how we interpret whether or not we're on track or not for a certain goal progress measure. So as I'm looking at the presentation on, which slide was it? Where it said on track. Sorry, I just lost it. Okay, thank you. Okay, so, and so this is like, so slide 7, if we could bring that up. It shows that we are on track at 51.7% because it's a point of time, February, and like, I don't know if you guys are like doing some sort of analysis to extrapolate out to August for 56%. So first I wanted to get clarity on that, about how you were able to project out that 51.7% is on track.
So I'll start with the response, and I was the one that worked with the team to kind of come up with a final determination, recognizing that in the past, we haven't necessarily put on track, not on track on this slide, and felt that to be LSG compliant, we needed to make sure that we went ahead and started to do that. And so what we did is looked at where we were, and so in February of 2023, 2024, we're at 51.7%, recognizing that our goal is 56%, right? So not too far away, 4.3% away from our target. Given the fact that last year at this point, we were 9% away, and that we expect this to increase every month, given the intentionality that we have, and really the evidence that we have observed over the last several months that the work that Dr. Fannin and Dr. Wilson and the rest of the team are doing are having meaningful impacts on the percent increasing over time. And so that is why for the whole, not the student groups within it, but as for the whole, we felt that it was appropriate to say on track. But we certainly recognize, as Dylan mentioned, that we do have student groups within it that are not on track, and we certainly recognize that.
So I think that's probably one of the things that we need to discuss as we refine this monitoring report. And for transparency, I was texting our LSG coach and was like, is this really on track if we're not hitting on track for every single student group? And that was like a big reason for us changing the scorecard 2 or 3 years ago to focus specifically on economically disadvantaged students. So there was no way we could ever say we were on track if our most vulnerable kids weren't. And so I would like us to really think about have that conversation. And this is no, statement on the hard work and progress that we have made. I think we just have to be really careful about the words we use, because when you say you're on track, we're kind of ignoring half the population of our school district that is actually not on track, right? Because it probably is about half the students that actually are not on track.
Yeah, so Dr. Holly actually talked about this today and yesterday about perhaps what we do is talk, again, because the goal is the whole, my understanding was that on that slide we had to use that. Now, what we could do, and this is what we talk about as we refine, is on the subsequent slides, say not on track for the student groups that are not, or we can get guidance and figure out, precisely what that looks like. My thought process is that in a year, you could actually have the total goal exceed your target and still not be on track.
Correct.
And so
that's the history
as a
of
whole.
AISD.
And so I just want to get clarity and make sure we're on the same page.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. And I think that we will have some, I've been just so you know, that was a question I had. And I think that that would be a great conversation for us to have as a team with our coach as well. I think we're just, where I am right now, I would want to say if there's any group that's not on track, then we can't say that we're on track. I mean, that's just me, but I think it's a greater conversation. I would definitely need some guidance from, our team and from our LSG coach on what words we put on here. But again, I do want to acknowledge that there are areas where we are making a lot of growth. And so please don't feel like I'm criticizing.
And that was
anything
totally
that the
on me.
team
Like
is doing.
I gave guidance
Yeah.
to the team about like how to.
Okay.
So
No, that's fine. So for you, like, don't feel like I'm criticizing the hard work or anything, because I'm super excited about the things I heard. I just want to be really, really careful, because I've been on this board when we patted ourselves on the back, and there are vast groups of children that were failing, and so that we were failing, and I don't want to get back into that old pattern of the words that we're using, even though the intent is correct. That makes any sense. Okay, so with that, before we vote to accept this, can I make a request that,
Sure.
okay, like, I'm happy to accept this with the understanding that we just take off the on track for the official document. Would that be acceptable?
Oh yeah, no, that's I have no concern with that.
Okay. Trustees, am I?
Thank you.
Yeah, does anybody else have thoughts or
concur.
disagreement? You concur? Okay, this side. All right, Trustee Boswell, I'm assuming out there in space, you're okay.
Yes, I am good with that.
Okay, so, all right, I really, really appreciate this work. And I want to make sure that people who are watching do take the time to look at that appendix and see that we actually have gone up for certain groups, like our most critical groups of students. So there is good work being done. And, you have our board support in continuing that work. So, all right. So we will now vote to accept this report as a formal acknowledgement that we have had a satisfactory conversation with the superintendent and have a deeper understanding about how the current reality for students lined up with our vision for them. So at this point, I will entertain a motion for the acceptance of this monitoring report.
I move that we accept the monitoring report.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Do we have to say the comment?
Yeah, should we say, we'll accept it with the provision that the administration makes a change?
Sure,
as
you can
described?
okay. Build that into your motion, or you can.
Okay, would you like to restate your motion, Trustee Kaufman?
Yes. So I move that we accept the monitoring report with the modification that was made, recommended by President Singh.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, having a motion by Trustee Kaufman and a second by Trustee Zapata to accept the report with the modification discussed. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All right, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will now move to our information, reports, and updates. So, Mr. Segura, would you please introduce the next item?
Absolutely. So next we have 5.1, which is TEA Special Education Agreed Upon Order Update. And tonight I have Dr. Reach, Chief Officer of Government Relations and Board Services, as well as Dr. Marianne Maxwell, Assistant Superintendent of Elementary Academics, and they'll be leading us through the conversation.
Good evening, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Segura. Tonight we are providing an update on our special education agreed order. We've gone through previously what makes up our agreed order, so I really want to highlight some of the actions that we've done since we've last met a month ago. So currently we have completed 35 of our 99 tasks. And that brings us with tasks on almost every single priority. We still have not done any of the priorities and any of the items in priority 3, which are due later this June and that we are working towards, and we'll have a bigger update for in June. But I want to touch on each one of these different priority areas. So priority 1, which is satisfying the corrective action plans, that's really the major reason that brought us into this order to begin with. Since we've last met, we've actually closed 8 more corrective action plans, kind of the big bulk of them. We have 6 remaining, and actually 5 of those are closed, but the due date has not yet come up. So we are still making progress on all of those, and we are on track to close all of these out. Priority 2, which is really what are we going to do to address priority 1, the identify and implement effective practices. We had a major item due this month on March 1st, and that was the completion of a MTSS, multi-tier system of support manual that the district will implement. Dr. Marianne Maxwell is joining us today, and she's going to kind of take us through that MTSS manual and the timeline that brought us here.
Good evening, trustees and Superintendent Segura. So this has been quite a bit of work that we've been doing for the past few months across departments. It's been a big effort, not just through the MTSS members, but with our special education department, our core academics, early learning, multilingual education, professional learning, you name it, they've been a part of working on this manual. So just wanted to provide some highlights on what it is, what some of the key points are, and what we'll be doing with it. So some of the major points of it are that it will include protocols for our universal screening, which we already do, but that will be one of the major data points that we'll begin to use for identifying students who need interventions in the classroom. So that it's one of multiple data points, but it's a big part of the system. What comes from that really are more clear protocols on how our campuses will be making decisions for students. These are database decision protocols, using assessments, data indicators, providing interventions, and then one key thing you'll hear us talking a lot about is progress monitoring. We'll be using tools to progress monitor students who are in interventions and using an intervention system itself to be able to track progress of those students and identify whether or not the interventions that are taking place are actually successful. And then the other thing that this manual does is it establishes some district-wide instructional practices. So the thing about MTSS, when it says multi-tiered, it really means it. It's talking about everything from the core classroom in Tier 1 to more targeted interventions that students are receiving in Tier 2 to intensive interventions with Tier 3. So it addresses all areas up until a student and makes major attempts to intervene with students before any other kind of SPED referral takes place. That is why it's part of the agreed order and really explains how those systems should be working together before referring students for SPED unless there's some sort of child find or something that we suspect might immediately be a disability, in which case you refer the student for SPED. So the MTSS manual serves really as this guiding document, and what it's going to do is ground our work for the next many months in professionally developing our district and campus leadership and also our teachers in how to implement the MTSS system. So this really next part of the order is all about implementation on campuses and us working with campuses to make sure that the protocols are in place, using classroom observations, helping, assisting with progress monitoring data and progress monitoring how our campuses are doing with implementation. Also lots of PD sessions and ongoing coaching and support. We'll begin that with the training with our campus leadership teams this summer, and then we'll begin to roll out with teachers next year. So just one of the main things that we're doing here with this, we've had MTSS in place for some time, but it's the consistency, the clear guidelines, the protocols for teachers and supporting them with how and why and in what places with what teams to make database decisions and just codifying this in the form of the manual so that we all have the same place that grounds us and the starting point for how we're defining high quality instruction and then what we're doing specifically for students who need different levels of instruction. So this is a very high-level overview of the timeline. There are more things than this in it, but this is just the fall. It's continuing work in the spring. But we started the work in creating the manual in December, and that went through February, and then we submitted on March 1st our first draft. Now we're in a phase with TEA. As we go back and forth a little bit, we'll receive some feedback from them for our first draft, make some adjustments to the manual if needed, and then submit a second draft, and then we'll have an opportunity to submit a third draft all the way into September. What we're looking for is actually a much earlier completion date than that, because we will, need to train campus leadership on this manual, our progress monitoring and classroom observation protocols by August 1st per the order. So we're looking at this summer using that opportunity through our Leadership Institute to spend some time with our campus leaders on this manual and these protocols. After that, campus leaders will train their teachers on this, so that all teachers, even if you're not a core teacher, have some information on if you have some concerns on a student. There are guidelines in this as well for referring for interventions and referring for just going through that database decision process. And then through the fall, we'll have ongoing observations, more professional development sessions, coaching, progress monitoring of how the MTSS system is being implemented. We will have a data submission. Our first data submission is October 31st to TEA regarding this implementation. That data submission will be with progress monitoring. But it'll be a combination of progress monitoring for those students that have all been screened, since it's universal screening, so submitting information on that. But then that should say Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. So students who have been identified for Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions will have documented in the system, and then we'll also be documenting which interventions they're receiving and tracking their progress on it. So all of that will be part of that submission.
Thank you. So we will have a lot to talk about with MTSS in the next few months, including some updates that we'll need to give to the board on this data and this information that we'll need to share with TEA, including, as she shared, the Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions provided, walkthrough data, and implementation data across our campuses. So a lot coming with MTSS. Oh, and then, of course, continuing training of all of our campus staff on these MTSS procedures. So I mentioned priority 3, which is kind of our data priority. A lot of work going on with that, and we'll be able to provide more information on that in the coming months. So I want to go to priority 4 and also celebrate a little bit because we have completed priority 4. We have finished all of the requirements within that priority. It does not mean that that priority is done and that now we forget it. It means that we take all that great work that we've done and make sure that we sustain it and keep it going. But as far as the deliverables to TEA, we have nothing left to send into TEA after I hit send on the last 2 items tomorrow, although they're already complete. So this, again, was the establishment of the Parent Outreach Campaign. We did hold our first CFAC meeting on February 21st. We have another meeting coming up in April. We have published all the meeting materials, and we have not published the minutes yet. Those will also go up. But all that's available on our CFAC website, which is under Advisory Committees for Austin ISD. And so we're excited to have one of our priorities complete, but we'll keep going with that great work. And then, of course, our last item, Lone Star Governance. We are currently waiting on possible feedback on the policy and handbook that we sent in. If needed, we'll make changes to that. And through discussions that we've had with TEA, we have talked about the alignment with our board meetings to ensure that when we have that information back, it's well aligned with bringing it back to the board to get feedback and then bringing it back to vote on, again, if needed. At our April regular voting meeting, the board will take part in their second quarterly self-evaluation and then compare those results to the first to see if there's growth compared to the first. And then we will also report on our first 3-month average for time that counts according to the order at the April 11th board information session. And so that'll be our very first time to share out that 3-month average that will count and will be reported to TEA. So that's an overview on where we're at on our TEA approved order. To let you know some of the items that are coming up soon. So over the next couple of months, meeting with the board, not only will we continue on our MTSS updates, we also want to share with you information about our special education audit done with our partner, Stetson. And then we also need to start working, we already are working, but share with our board our strategic plan and our state of special education report that we will need to provide to our board by June and turn into TEA by the end of June. So that's kind of the big items that are coming up in the next couple of months. We'd now like to open it up to any questions.
Thank you very much. Trustees, are there any questions? Superintendent Segura, I'm just really just so glad to hear about all the good progress that you guys are making. It is making a huge difference. We're not there yet. We're not done. I know, but I'm feeling really, really optimistic and appreciate the hard work of the team.
And I appreciate that, President Singh and Board. I do want to kind of reinforce just the amount of work that's going into MTSS and the amount of professional development that's going to have to occur around it. It is a huge lift, but we think that it'll have impacts for all students, and we'll really see an improvement in academic outcomes. And so just really having this in place is going to be beneficial, I think, for us long term. So we're excited to do that. Oh,
And
Trustee
Trustee Singh, I do have one question.
Please go ahead.
I would love to know, Dr. Reach, you mentioned on Party 4, the family outreach plan that's been completed, talked about sustaining it. Is there a plan to sustain it, and how will that be shared with the board and the community?
That is to continue to work with our CFAC, our Special Education Family Advisory Committee, and the work that they're doing to not only help us understand our strategic plan that we're going to be working on, but the other things that we're implementing. And then if you go, and I may need to ask Dr. Robinette, it's on our SPED website. And where do they go for the family engagement items on the SPED website? Thank you. I'm going to ask Dr. Robinette to help me with that one, if you don't mind.
Good evening, Board. Thank you, Trustee Boswell. I hope you feel better. You don't sound quite like yourself. Under CFAC, there's quite a bit of information around the parent outreach materials as well. And we will have our next meeting, as he mentioned, in April. There's quite a bit of redesign that's been done to our website, including our Empower Hours, including information about Child Find, finding help for your child, ongoing supports and structures. And so if you just Google those pieces under the Special Education Department, it's sort of a combination of several items associated with that, as well as our CFAC. One of the things that in spacing those meetings that we're already doing with the Special Education Family Advisory Council is receiving feedback on the website. It's part of their assignments for this, or the request for them to review prior to the next meeting so that we can really make some other changes and improvements to that. So it's a beginning standard that we met in terms of the criteria for the state, and you can find that on our special education website. That's gotten much more streamlined, and we're likewise building in additional supports and structures based on the recommendations, not only coming from the community, but also from the support from our monitoring team as well.
So to remind our public, our next meeting for CFAC will be April 17th, 5:30 to 7. That meeting is open to the public. It also accepts public comment at the start of the meeting. And we want to welcome interested parents, staff members, especially students, if any students want to come, to join us at that meeting, provide feedback, listen to what we're discussing, and then grab one of the staff members at the end if there's still questions.
Thank you.
Trustee Whitley-Chu?
I wanted to know if there were any, do we receive feedback from the CFAC on the plan? Were there any concerns about the MTSS plan?
Yeah, we have not, thank you for the question. We have not yet received feedback from the CFAC on the MTSS plan. This was actually the first draft that is provided to the state. It's critically important to the state and also to us in terms of improvement. There's some high quality research around strong multi-tiered systems of support. And all of our staff members at the campus level are engaging in what are called tier or TEA Learn modules around multi-tiered systems of support. And what we're hearing is some positive feedback around that, but also some questions and some desire for there to be some strong alignment in any kinds of resources, tools, and manuals that we implement in our district. That's also an expectation in the review from the agency, but that it's also localized. In other words, Austinified in a way that makes appropriate sense, but is evidence-based and structured for our team. So once we receive that first set, that feedback from the agency. I don't think there's anything wrong at all with sort of as we're in progress, providing that to the CFAC, and there will be multiple checkpoints until that we get a finalized approval from the agency. Did I miss anything? No, I think that's good.
Okay, and I also hear like the turnaround on this is pretty quick, where we're training teachers at the end of August to implement something in the fall.
That is correct. One of the things I want to thank the trustees on is that we're really trying to spiral in there. That's not the only training that's in the agreed order that's associated with the learning and growth for our teachers, our staff, and overall alignment as a system. But thanks to you and your support, there are additional days built into professional learning this year into the calendar that are true investments to build that in for teachers to have some time to make sense of that. There's also a requirement after that initial set of sort of spiraling that doesn't only include MTSS, but really embeds into it differentiation, culturally proficient instructional strategies and practice, universal design for learning, and the tools and strategies that we have in place and built into the manual. Once that's done, there's also a requirement and an opportunity for us to build in a sequence of learning for our team members that we'll be doing. We had a meeting literally last night to start pacing out how can we build those pieces for ongoing touch points. And the second strand of that that's built into the order is coaching and support for folks in and around that. So MTSS overall in overall instructional improvement is obviously not going to be a one and done for anyone. And we want to be on this journey together and are using this as an opportunity to really leverage high quality instructional practices that will lead to high quality outcomes for our kids.
Are we anticipating an increase of staffing? Because with the tier 2, that's lots of small group instruction. And as we know, you can't do a small group and teach other small groups at the same time. And some groups are going to need, you might have more than 4 kids in a class that need tier 2 instruction. So how are we planning to address that, and how can the board support that?
So, Trustee Willie-Chu, I'll take that one. This is one of the things that we are exploring and may very well find itself into the budget. It's not lost on us that what you're describing is a real condition that we're going to have to address in the classroom in order for it to be sustainable, and also for MTSS to be implemented with fidelity for years to come. And so we do recognize that there are positions that we may have to explore. And I think for us, we do have an idea of what that would look like. It is not an inexpensive proposition. And we'll introduce that, I think, here in the near future once we get feedback from the board, I think later today, regarding kind of what our constraints might be with the budget overall. But we recognize that as a high priority, one that is aligned with the order, one that also will improve student outcomes over time. But it is a position, and it is going to be expensive, for lack of a better term, word, given kind of where we are. But yeah, we acknowledge that, and that'll come forward.
Okay, and I think that's going to be helpful for families, who are concerned, probably rightfully so, with the history in the state of Texas of capping the number of students in special education services. Is this a way to have students getting fewer services? And so knowing that there's an investment with more staff and actual small groups, and I think with more buy-in for our teachers who have been asking for this support for their students for a really long time. Just because we know it's okay. You have to do a small group and tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3, and you have a whole lot of students needing tier 2, and making the job possible because everyone wants kids to succeed. So I think we look forward to hearing about that.
Yeah, it'll come forward pretty quick.
Yeah.
All right, trustees, any other questions? Oh, yes, Trustee Zapata.
So this sounds really great. I'm curious, how will you measure accountability from the campuses that they're doing these things?
So a few different ways. We look at, one, making sure that all students, we've talked a little bit about fidelity with MAP screening, fidelity with assessments that we're using for this, but also fidelity to multiple kinds of assessments. We don't, there are so many different kinds and different points of data that we can collect to make these decisions for students. So part of it is really just ensuring that our assessment system is good and strong. But we do have a system that teachers use currently to enter students who are receiving interventions and then enter progress for those students as they continue through interventions. So what we can do as far as accountability is ensure that all of that is happening. We're at the district level, much like our special education team has done with the trainings that have happened this last year. We'll be doing continual checks in our system to ensure that the students that are listed as receiving Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions are in fact documented in the system as receiving them, and that they have progress monitoring checks that go along with it. So it's definitely a district-wide effort at both the campus and the district levels. That's a primary way we ensure that the interventions are happening. We also have multiple kinds of what we call the child study team meetings. Part of that is minimum 3 times a year is a school-wide data meeting that where you look at multiple kinds of assessments and attendance and behavioral data to analyze where your students are and whether or not they're moving through tiers appropriately. Another is our use of our PLCs, which would be, we're recommending at least once a month currently in our manual to have PLC team-wide meetings looking at all of the students that a team will work with. And then we have individual child study team meetings. All of those meetings are documented in the system as well. So it's a matter of us going through the system, ensuring that it's being used, and working with campuses on if we have any gaps, if we have any questions about students that might be on the list that don't have interventions showing, then us working with campuses to make sure that we are documenting. That's just the documentation piece. There's also the instructional piece in the classroom. So we have classroom observation protocols that we're creating that some of them are specific to literacy and math, but some of them have very general, highly effective instructional practices. We're we will be calibrating with campuses to make sure that we're all looking and using those tools the same, providing feedback. And then we have ongoing PD sessions for anyone that's needs a little more support with implementing the system and coaching as well. So all of that, all of those are things that we will be documenting and tracking at the campus and district levels and sharing with TEA.
I think those are all great ways, and I'm wondering if there's a way to, like, our campus is already completed and understood this manual, some kind of signed certificate. That way, it becomes the culture of that campus. This is how we will operate moving forward, and it's an expectation and understanding of that expectation.
Yes, so it's part of why we're starting with campus leadership teams and then wanting them to turn it around to their campuses so that every teacher is at their home campus when they receive this training and they understand that that is how the campus will do things. Part of what we'll need to do as well is verify that all teachers did go through this training, so there will be a check in our systems for that. We talked a little bit last night as a meeting that Dr. Robinette mentioned. In different ways that we'll be able to address this, but part of that we did discuss in having that in our system so that they complete a check for understanding, have a certificate for that in-person course, and that way we know everyone has been through it and have it as a sustainable piece so that it does become part of our system.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Great. All right. Well, thank you. This was really good. Really appreciate the work. Okay, so our next item is a continued discussion of our ever-important district budget. The board is scheduled to approve a budget in June, and we have We've asked the administration to provide budget updates and discussions at each board meeting going forward. Tonight, we want to continue the discussion from last month's budget discussion and questions presented by the administration. I do also want to mention that after the last meeting we had a little budget retreat and training with our LSG coach, and got some more training on really how to ground the budget conversations in student outcomes. And the trustees had an opportunity to each share what kind of data and what would be really helpful to them to demonstrate that. So really appreciate everyone's work on that. But for this discussion, we have scheduled 30 minutes. So Mr. Segura, would you please introduce this item?
Absolutely, I'd love to. President Singh and Board of Trustees. With me tonight, I have Ed Ramos, our Chief Financial Officer. We have a very brief but very familiar presentation, which we are going to provide to the board, and then provide opportunity for responses to the questions that we'll be proposing. So as we move to slide one of the things that we want to reinforce to continue to talk about is our current reality. AISD is committed to adhering to a board policy required fund balance of 20%. This has been the case for several years, for many years in fact, and it is something that we continue to use as we adopt and plan our budgets and plan for future outlooks. Last year, we also did adopt a budget deficit of $52 million. Currently, we are on track to cut that $52 million deficit in about half by the end of this fiscal year. So again, by the end of this fiscal year, June 30th, we will have cut the $52 million deficit to approximately half. We also know that when we passed that budget last year, we were expecting perhaps, maybe hoping perhaps, for some legislative changes that might increase the basic student allotment. We however know that that did not happen. So therefore, as we move forward, we would like to have a conversation and recognize that anything that we do moving forward will have to have an offsetting cut, meaning that any cost increase will have to have an offsetting cost reduction. And there are certain budget parameters that we have to discuss as we move through this process in order to ensure that all students receive what they need and that we continue to provide the compensation required in order for families staff that serve our students to be able to live in the community that they serve. And so we do have 3 questions that we would like to share with the board, and would love to hear a conversation around these and potential responses. The first would be, how much fund balance should we keep? Our recommendation, or my recommendation as the superintendent, is that we maintain our 20% fund balance. One of the things that I recognize is that, typically any consideration of an adjustment downward would be only if we had more certainty in the future, and we certainly do not have that at this point. We do not necessarily understand what the legislature may do moving forward. We certainly recognize that there are cost increases just over time. We know that that occurs. We have utility costs increasing. We have insurance costs that are increasing. And we also acknowledge that though we've been very active and have been able to curb some of the enrollment losses that we've seen in past years, it's still a reality. And so at this point, given those unknowns, we are not comfortable as an administration recommending reducing the 20% fund balance policy. Question 2, how much of a deficit can be tolerated? Our current recommendation is that we carry a maximum of a $30 million deficit. We also recognize that moving forward, decreasing the deficit would also lessen the impact to fund balance. Right? So if we increase it, it would have a larger impact. If we decrease our deficit, it would lessen the impact. And so wanted to get information or feedback from the board whether we're in alignment regarding kind of that parameter. And then lastly, carrying forward a $30 million deficit, if that is the direction we ultimately end up going, that any increase would have an equal offsetting decrease. Meaning that any add, and whether it's staff allocations, compensation, we would equally have to find an offsetting cost cut. And recognizing that for us as an organization, we have to be very, very intentional, understanding where every cut is being considered and how those cuts may impact the learning environment for our students. We also recognize that any change, one way or the other, must align with board priorities. We also recognize that it has to limit or not impact the classroom, and it also must align with initiatives. Again, those we've continued to talk about them. Those will be refined as we move forward. But special education, mental health, climate and culture, et cetera, we've talked about those over the last year. So as we move to the next slide, I think it's really important we spend a little bit of time here. And what this slide represents is our fund balance. And recall, by board policy, we've had a 20% fund balance policy set for quite some time. And so these bar charts represent from years 2017 through 2018, all the way through 2026, 2027. The bars that are in teal, kind of like that greenish color, those are actuals. And so you can see in 2017, our fund balance was $266.2 million, and that has decreased over time to our last actuals from 2021 to 2022, which was $191.8 million. And so what you see in gray from 22-23 through 26-27, that was the projected fund balance when we adopted the budget last year. And so if we kind of all go back in our memories and remember kind of this same graphic a little over a year ago, that is what we were estimating the fund balance to be in 22-23, 23-24, and so on through 26-27. And so just for clarification purposes, the gray bars that are to the right of the green bars from 22-23 through 26-27, those were the forecasted or projected fund balances as of last year when we adopted the budget, right? So I'm trying to juxtapose kind of where we were last year given where we know we are today. And so looking specifically at fiscal year 22-23, which was last year, we were estimating, when you look specifically at that bar chart, that we would end the fiscal year with $196 million. We actually ended the fiscal year with $288.7 million in fund balance. And we'll talk a little bit about how we got there, but I think it's important to note that we actually ended up being better off than we thought we would have been. Okay? And so as you move forward over the course of the next several years, what you'll see in yellow is the expected reduction given our new reality, right? So our fund balance went up to $288.7 million, and now we're projecting downward, right, based on the deficit budget and other expenses, kind of where we currently expect to be. The one thing I want to point out is that this trend line on fund balance does not include any additional asks, no increases in compensation, but equally no cuts greater than the $30 million needed to kind of maintain this trend. And so the reason that this is important and the reason that we talk about it this way is because for us as an organization, given that we don't know what the legislature will do in 2025, we don't know what the legislature will do in 2027, we also recognize that enrollment has decreased, though not as quite steep a slope, and costs continue to rise. We want to ensure that as far out as we can project, we are as healthy as we can be, given the number of unknowns that we have. And again, currently, right now, with no additional costs and no additional offsets, except for the $30 million, which is required to maintain the slope, we can maintain a 20% fund balance through the 2026-2027 fiscal year. And again, I want to give praise to our finance team, given just how better positioned we are this year than we would have otherwise been if we hadn't made those adjustments at the end of the last fiscal year. And so the last thing I'll say is that black trend line, if you go back, Ed, one slide, that crosses the entire graph, that is the 20% fund balance point in each of those fiscal years. And you can see that it changes because our general operating budget changes. Compensation increases, there are utility costs that increase, and so that 20%, though it is kind of in a tight range, it does change year over year. Okay, so as we move to the next slide, I do want to point out that, we are not alone. Many other school districts within the state of Texas are having very similar conversations. We recognize as an organization that there are investments that we need to make, but we also are facing the real, just the reality that in order to get there, we're going to have to make some difficult decisions, as an organization and in alignment with the board. And so, I think with that, what I'd like to do is to kind of, have a conversation with the board and get feedback regarding the questions. And Ed and I can certainly answer any questions that you may have, but specifically understanding kind of where we are and where the board would like to go given our current kind of constraints and realities.
This is like intense information. I told our superintendent that graph, if you can go back to it, that should win some sort of prize for like one of the best graphs I've ever seen, because it gives so much information. I don't know if we can pull it up again, but I want to make sure I understand a couple of things. So, and again, trustees, I know that like we feel like sometimes we're under pressure to not ask questions because of the 50% on student outcomes, but this is a very important part of our board work. We have 30 minutes allotted, but if we even need to go beyond that, like we are fiduciaries of the district, so please don't feel limited in your questions. This is too important. So with this gorgeous graph, I just want to make sure I understand. So we're projecting out that next year, the year after that, and even the year after that, with everything remaining the same, we will still be able to comply with our 20% fund balance.
So the one clarification, you see the little note there, I have a little red dot arrow.
Yeah.
It says assumes $30 million reduction and no adjustments. To maintain this trend line, we are already going to have to consider a $30 million cut.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure. So there is nothing in addition to that.
Okay.
And this is something that I think maybe wasn't clear in the past, and I'm really trying to provide clarity around it. Because we are carrying a deficit from last year, we were able to make up a lot of it this fiscal year, but that may not be the reality moving forward, right? Interest rates will change, costs will continue to increase. So to really get back to where we maintain this trend line and stay above 20% fund balance through the fiscal year 26-27, we will have to take that $30 million reduction.
Okay, so we are going to have to cut $30 million. Yes.
So just to clarify what I understand of that, it's the gray bar shows what would happen if we didn't make that $30 million cut.
No.
No.
So the gray bar represents, so if we went back to last year, right before you passed the budget, we provided a very similar chart, and we forecasted what fund balance would be through each of these years, 22, 23, all the way to 26, 27. And so in June of last year, right before you passed the budget, we were estimating that in 24, 25, your fund balance would be $153 million. What we're saying is that because we were actually able to add money to the fund balance in 22, 23, and then stair-stepping down based on the deficit budget and cost, we're actually at $228 million. Okay. And so what we're doing is kind of juxtaposing last year's fund balance forecast against this year's fund balance forecast. So you can really see kind of how we're in a healthier position, still a very difficult position, however. Is that helpful, Trustee Kaufman?
Yes, thank you.
And just to put a finer point on that, I was really interested to see this because I just wanted to make sure that we were not making decisions that were riskier than we had made last year. Because I remember last year I was having some palpitations at some of the risks we were taking. I was like, just show me the numbers so I can make sure we're actually becoming more conservative as we're, looking out into the out years. So just to go back to the question that we were discussing, that $30 million reduction for the next school year. So this is assuming not just the deficit, but this is now like we're actually going to have to cut, correct?
So by cutting the $30 million, we will be able to maintain the $30 million deficit. That's like the easiest way to put it.
Okay. So are you saying that we are going to have to make $30 million in cuts?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Just to so one of the things that we talk about is between last year and this year, several things have just changed because of just things change.
Yeah.
And so costs have increased. So our fixed costs have essentially increased. And so in order to maintain the 30, we still have to offset the increase in fixed costs from last year to this year.
Okay.
The other thing that we have to acknowledge is that there's likely to be a reduction in interest earnings because we're seeing interest rates go down.
Okay.
And so though last year we were able to pick up 27 million or 25 million, this year we'll get close to that, but we don't want to bank on us being able to pick it all up in the same way. So those are kind of all the little nuances that kind of make this back and forth sometimes difficult to clearly communicate. But generally speaking, we as an organization will have to reduce our expenses by $30 million in order to preserve the $30 million deficit,
Okay.
which produces this stair step down through 26, 27, which still remains above the 20% fund
And that's
balance.
assuming not a single cent of increase in new expenses.
Correct.
So, and that includes compensation. So this is assuming, like what we're seeing here, is assuming no increases in compensation.
Correct.
And even then, we'd have to make a $30 million cut.
Correct.
Oh
And so one of the things that we are talking about is if any increase would have to have an offsetting decrease, meaning that if you increase compensation or anything by 10, 15 million, we would take that cut further. And so I think the last point I would make is we talk about 20% quite often. I do want Ed to please communicate out what our monthly payroll is. I believe it's north of 53 million per month. And so is it 53 million? And so when I think about it in those terms, you know, to be a healthy organization, you typically want to have multiple months of cash in order to pay payroll in case there is a financial crisis that we'd have to navigate. And so with a $200 million fund balance, you only have payroll for about 4 months. And one of the things that we know, and Ed can speak to this better than anybody, is that in the course of our fiscal year, we actually are paying out payroll before we get reimbursed from the state. And because we have these funds, we don't have to borrow in order to pay payroll, because it's a timing issue with the state. So I don't know, Ed, if you'd like to clarify that, but that's one of the nuances why having this does help us in a variety of different ways.
So historically, we began collecting our local tax collections in the month of December, January, February. So we know that our cash flow runs pretty low in the months of August, October, November timeframe. And so our fund balance helps us maintain the cash flow to pay payroll in those months. Without a healthy fund balance, we'd have to borrow money to have the cash to make payroll in October and November.
Well, this is somber, but it's also not somber, because I know that, like, we have been, you, Ed, and your team, and Superintendent Segura have been very responsible. I know that we were able to cut our deficit from this school year almost in half. We're on track for that?
Oh, yeah.
correct?
No, we're on track for that.
Yeah, so that's all good, but that's assuming, like, all that is baked into this.
Oh, yes.
So, and when was the last time the legislature increased funding?
The last the last increase to the per student allotment was in 2019. So this, if there's no increase with any special session, we're going to go 6 years without an increase to the basic allotment.
And this at a time where our students are still struggling after COVID, and inflation is.
And over that same time
through the
period, we've experienced 17 to 19% inflation growth.
All right, trustees, any questions?
Can we go back into the slide? I think it was the second slide, second question maybe.
One more, I believe. This slide, trustee? Or the question, second question, right? How much of a
It was
deficit
the
can
one
be
that
tolerated?
said, maybe it was the third one. It was about impacting the classroom. I don't have it up on here. I have it on paper.
Yes, it would have been the third question,
Okay.
carrying forward a $30 million deficit.
I'm really not sure if you have to make a $30 million increase, how it won't impact classrooms at some point. And that really is the thing that I'm kind of struggling with. I guess as we get in more and we have more conversations and we kind of look and see what, where, I mean, that's a big number. It's a really big number. And I guess there may be look-fors, maybe other districts. I mean, every district is in, an individual district, but maybe there are areas where like we maybe haven't considered. I feel like this leadership is very innovative. You guys are always thinking outside of the box, and y'all need to bring that energy. I will bring that energy also, but I really think that that's something that I really want to consider, like how close to the bone can we get on something else so that we don't actually, because I mean, you can reduce, right, and not get rid of something. Because, I mean, we see that, I apologize for not being here earlier. I know that one of the groups that was speaking was about libraries, right? And that's, zero. And, how is that impacted, especially in a district where literacy is like our main focus? So, like, I would love for us to give X amount of dollars. I'm going to say a damn number of people like, she said to give that much money, but X amount of dollars for them to be able to buy books. Or come up with a grant or something. I don't know, but I see that. I guess my next question is: will we be having a longer conversation soon?
Well, I think, Trustee, the answer to that, yes. I think we can have the longer conversation. I think is going to be helpful. One of the things that President Singh and I talked about is it is difficult to bring back solutions unless we know the parameters that we're working within. Which is why these three questions are helpful, because if there are some risk tolerances that the board is wanting to explore, that the administration is not willing to explore, we need to have that conversation because that would impact what we bring back to you all.
Understand the bullet points now. Gotcha.
And so that's why I want to limit impact to the classroom, and everything we look at, we are going to understand what impact, like what is that resource providing to the classroom. Is it a report? Is it a service? Is it, some other type of, kind of general support? If that goes away, how does that resource get reallocated to elsewhere in the district? What we don't want to do is just assume that it's equal to all. And we want to make sure that we really understand what that might look like. We do believe there are efficiencies, so I don't want to mislead anybody and say it's all going to be cuts, but I do want to recognize that at the scale that we're talking about, it's going to be difficult for it not to have an impact, but the focus is to be away from the classroom.
Understood. Thank you.
Any other trustees have questions? Trustee Boswell? If you have any
Yes,
questions.
I am extremely interested in.
I have a question, and this is something we talked about last year that got us to the place where we ended up with, a deficit budget that ended up being an investment that we were able to recoup. So, we're talking about the risks of not, there can be a risk of, not cutting, but what is the risk if we do, which could further impact us financially if we are losing enrollment, if our students aren't achieving.
Yeah, I think, Trustee Willie, that the question that you're asking is the question. I think last year it was a calculated risk, and I think that our system benefited, and we saw real improvements in the classroom. We saw a lot of things improve, I think, based on the decision that the board did to support that. And at the time, we we felt like it was a calculated risk and that perhaps the state legislature would have done something differently, but that didn't occur. Luckily for us, we were in a position to withstand that, knowing that if we did have to do that, we'd be having difficult conversations now. I think as we move forward, what we're going to be wanting to do is to limit the conversations around very few things. And so if there's an ask, it can't be 20 different asks. It needs to be like these 3 or 4 things are of the highest priority from the administration and the board. And we're willing to explore offsetting these costs. And the way that we're going to perhaps offset that, the administration will come back and say, this is like how we would tend to do it, and then come to a place where there's a balance. And I think that value exchange is, and the impact to the system is what we need to talk about together. Because you're right. I mean, we saw attrition at Title I campuses decrease by 11%. I don't know that that would have happened if we didn't have the investment. And if we don't continue to invest, what would be the repercussions moving forward? What you're asking is precisely the right question. What we need to do is to kind of put parameters around the conversation so we know what we're bringing to you, because I don't want to get to a place where we're introducing costs that are not on anybody's radar, right, and not on anybody's priority list. Though there are many, many needs out there, there's going to be a small subset that are worth exploring, and that's what I'm trying to maybe get us to converge on, is that conversation.
Any other questions, trustees? No. So, Superintendent Segura, I know that there were 3 questions that you had for us. If you don't mind, if someone can put that slide back. And I do want to get a good, some sense from trustees about where you are feeling with the 3 bullet points kind of that are related to our risk tolerance. And Trustee Boswell, I see your face again on Zoom. Did you have any questions or comments?
I do, yes. I really think it's important very soon for our community and our board to have a sense of not a specific menu of cuts, but the types of things that are on the menu, as well as a sense of what specific investments cost. Because I think it's really hard to talk with our community about numbers this big without having a real sense of what does it cost to give a 1% raise, what kinds of things would add up to a $30 million cut. So I really hope that we'll be bringing that to our community very, very soon. Just want to say that before we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Boswell. Yes, Trustee Zapata.
Also, right now, the staff are currently in community conversations around the budget. So, and I'd like to pause until, when will we be getting some of that information so it could help guide our decisions moving forward.
So we're getting that, and we've been going through them. We can probably provide, it's later in March is when we'll have all that compiled, but we can maybe provide an update. I think one of the things I'll say is, Ed is in all those meetings, and our finance department is as well, and so that all is kind of with us while we're even having these preliminary conversations. But you're right, we definitely need to make sure the board kind of has the benefit of that input as well and information. But I do want you to know that each of those meetings is facilitated by the finance team, and I think, Ed, you've been at almost all of them, if not all of them. So I just want you to know that that's one of the ways that the input is being brought into the conversation. But you're right, we need to make sure we provide that to the board as well.
And we are receiving community input through the Thought Exchange product, so we can provide a summary of the highest rated thoughts that we're seeing from the community.
Thank you.
All right, so I think I'm ready to look at those 3 questions again and maybe kind of just go down. This is not like voting or anything, but this is really a chance for us to kind of give a general feedback on where we sit with the risks. So can we bring that slide up that actually lists out the 3 questions?
One at a time?
Yeah, let's do one at a time. Yeah. Okay, so the first one, administration's recommendation, maintain a 20% fund balance. So this has been in our policy for a while now, and it's and what I'm hearing is that's appropriate given the size of our payroll, and it's kind of necessary to give us that cushion to ensure that our employees continue to get paid on time, which is extremely important to us. So can you talk, I guess for like, I'm pretty conservative in nature, so I'm gonna say yes. Like that's what I'm totally supportive of maintaining the fund balance, particularly considering the legislature. I'm not hearing a lot of talk about, you know, an increase. I think vouchers are still a real threat in future sessions, and all of that is gonna present additional risk for us. Inflation is not really going anywhere, and we are still, you know, our enrollment is better at this point in time than it was last year, is my understanding.
Well, I would say that we have not lost at the rate that we had thought we would lose, and so the downward trend has
Okay.
been, you know,
Mitigated a
yeah.
bit. Okay.
That's
But it's not like we're seeing huge increases, so. But yeah, I think, you know, but every one of us is unique and we all get the same vote. So I'm definitely, would love to hear what other trustees, how y'all are feeling about this.
I would be open to discussions of lowering it. I'm open to that.
Any other trustees? Trustee Gonzalez?
I share your concerns about the possibilities of future increases, especially based on the results of Tuesday's primaries statewide in relation to the conversation about vouchers. I would be interested in seeing what the consequence would be to exploring something like what Trustee Whitley-Chu just explained, lowering potentially. What would it look like? I think ultimately, yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm interested to see what it looks like, but I'm also realistic about what the future looks like.
Can I ask for clarifications?
Sure.
Go for it.
I'm
Yes,
fine
you
with
may.
Is there,
This is a conversation.
So when we talk about exploring reducing, is there a threshold that you wouldn't feel comfortable going below, knowing that? So if we, you know, one way to think about it is like in terms of months, right? So if you have 4 months at 200 million, you know, going to 15% would give you roughly 3 months. I think below. I mean, so I guess what I'm wondering is there a thought on when you say lowering? Is it just providing just various scenarios, or is it what does a couple points here look like, or is it the recommendation of perhaps exploring a little bit more of a risk tolerance and then coming back with a recommendation? I just want to make sure I understand, because I don't think I'm hearing go down to 5%, but I'm also wanting to make sure that I come back with something that is reasonable. So I just for whatever, maybe it's not even worth the dialogue, but I just wanted to make sure that I had if there's any thoughts on that. So.
I would defer to your expertise in terms of what the best way to present those scenarios would be. I mean, I would say certainly I don't think 5% is one that I would be interested in looking at, but
for sure, yeah, it's a sure.
That's just me. I don't know if anybody else has something they want to add.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I would be interested in knowing what a very small, you know, moderate reduction, a very small, modest reduction would get us. You know, what would 1% net? What is the cost benefit there? What would going down to 18% net? What is the cost benefit there? If we were looking at a more like a 3.5 month than a 4, that would be helpful to me. And I also would like to have at the same time we're looking at that, would like to have a serious conversation about our copper pennies.
Copper pennies.
Thank you.
That's so I having had a conversation with you last week, I do not particularly feel a need to explore options regarding lowering it below 20%, because I'm concerned that there is no contingency plan. There is no, it's like, I'd be happy to spend money for the bank if I knew I'm getting a check next week, but there is no indication that any check is coming in the mail anytime soon. And the next legislature won't be in session at the time that we spend that money and dip below the 20%. And most likely, these cuts are hard. And so pretty much anything we invest in, it's going to also be there next year and the next year and the next year. So if we incur costs that dip us down to 17%, then that means next year those same costs are going to dip us down to 14%. And now we're spiraling downwards at a time when there's no indication of what the future holds. So while I was very comfortable with risk last year, with there being a chance, I would say a 95% chance that the legislature was going to spend a portion of the huge budget surplus that we have on public education when it was a bipartisan issue, and yet it didn't happen. And now there's a 0% chance almost of an increase next term because there is no legislature in session. And then there's a lesser chance of it the next session because the change in, so I just feel like we are entering into a much riskier area. And so where I was very risk tolerant last year, I am not risk tolerant this year, because that then starts to get into, are we going to be able to pay checks to our teachers? And if we go 1 month in this district where we cannot pay our teachers on time as a whole,
Game over.
Yeah, so I'm not risk. I appreciate the recommendation of a 20% as being the minimum.
All right, who has not spoken? I haven't tried. Did you get a chance to share?
I was actually off the dais.
Okay, would you like to weigh in?
What he said.
Okay. What David said. And Trustee Zapata?
Yes, I too.
Thank you. So I think, and we have a couple trustees not here, I don't think it would hurt to see scenarios since a couple of trustees are interested in seeing that. So would y'all want to see like an 18% or?
And I would like to second Trustee Boswell's question, that Chief Ramos, you have, addressed here before about some of the revenue generating opportunities that our community has to invest in their schools and what that could look like. Because we know that our community really loves our kids and loves Austin ISD and has come through for us time and again. And they know how, serious it is now, I would say, especially after Tuesday. So I would love for the board and the community to see those numbers.
Does anybody support? Yeah, no, I think that's very helpful.
Yeah, what she
Really
said.
Super helpful. Yeah, are we, I just want to make sure all the trustees had a chance to speak, and I think they did, right? Okay, anyone else want to add anything before we maybe shift into the copper pennies? A little toe dip into a copper penny conversation? Are we ready for that? Okay.
So do you want to go into the copper penny conversation at a high level now, or do you want to wait till you get past the next two questions? I just want to make sure, because they could be all kind of
Yeah,
woven together.
Yeah, let's go through the next question then, and then we'll do copper pennies. And half the people are like, what the heck is a copper penny? But we'll get to all that. I know I didn't know that until a couple of years ago. So anyway, yes, so let's go to the next question. And I don't remember what that was.
It was how much of
Oh,
a
yes.
budget deficit can be tolerated? And so, again, going back to the slide that you saw, the one that has the fund balance going through 26, 27, what that graph shows is a $30 million cut or reduction in expenses and carrying a $30 million deficit. And so that produces that trend line that keeps us above 20% fund balance. Again, exploring different things that'll shift, but generally speaking, carrying $30 million deficit is about the most that at this time we would feel comfortable. So that was kind of the question. Is that?
That's great. All right, so trustees, any thoughts on this one? In a sense, it's asking the previous question, but in a different way, right?
Well, not necessarily, because you can maintain a 20% fund balance, maintain a $30 million deficit, but if the third question is true, then your cut offset becomes larger. So if you want to reduce the deficit, then your cuts now increase, right? If you want to increase the deficit, then your cuts could potentially decrease. So that's why that relationship, I think, is important to have a conversation around. What we're saying is, at 30 million, anything added is also going to be netted out. So that doesn't necessarily have the same dynamic if it goes to 20 million or if it goes to 40. So that's why. And then, of course, the calculus is all kind of changed if we talk about copper pennies on top of that, which we can certainly have that conversation after this. But that's the exchange that we're trying to explore.
Thank you. Who wants to start this time?
I mean, I'll start. And
Sure.
my comments are similar to before, where I think that I'm more risk averse now with this. But I also think this one lends itself more towards when we actually look at what the efficiencies might be or where the cuts might be, of really, knowing that those cuts aren't generic across the board, 10% cuts, but they're actually strategic cuts looking specifically at what is the impact of cutting this for students in the classroom, right? And then what is the plan to replace important services that might be cut by reducing that? So as long as we can have those, because I think if we cannot get good answers right on those, then we have to start looking at, well, maybe we can't get down to $30 million deficit. Maybe we have to maintain a $35 or $40 million deficit because we cannot cut so deeply as to, to where it's not going to impact student performance. So as a starting point, I like the idea of limiting to 30 million.
I'm going to second what Trustee Kaufman said. So how are you feeling, Trustee Gonzalez?
I think overall bad, but I would say I really like Trustee Kaufman's suggestion of leading with the impact in mind rather than kind of obsessing over the number itself. But also, that being said, going over that doesn't feel like the right decision based on all the context that we're within.
Thank you. Trustee Hunter?
The last bullet point was like, agree? Sorry. The last bullet point on the slide, ask us if what the district has recommended. I'm in agreement with that. It just, I think that I just wrote down what you said, Trustee Gonzalez, leading with the impact in mind. And so that's where, because I know our conversation previously was like, what evidence do you need to know that the budget is fill in the blank, whatever. And I think that's the question we're considering, but also like, what's the impact? So I think I'm pretty much in agreement with the last statement that we said, which again is this statement is my current reality is this every month, but I know how more comfortable I feel when there's savings, right? Because what, you're supposed to have like X amount of savings for like if your car breaks or whatever, my car better not break right now, right? Kid better not break anything. And I think that our fund balance gives us that assurance that if something happens, our family is taken care of. And so that's where I'm probably going to be on the majority of these questions that we go through like that.
Thank you. And and I also love the concept of leading with the impact and appreciate the administration saying, that the intent is to really limit the impact on classrooms. And at the same time, getting as much, whatever recommendations you provide, whether it's increasing or decreasing, it's going to be really helpful to tie that back to our scorecard and our student outcomes and how that is, how do we know that, introducing this thing is going to help us in certain ways. Now, it might not be a direct thing and super obvious, just like you don't think athletic trainers lead to student outcomes, but they do, as long as that line is drawn for us so that we can see the justification. I think that's going to be really helpful. So, yeah.
So one of the things that I think we're going to struggle with is the degree of impact. And I think of this in terms of compensation. You know, because we're such a large organization, every 0.5% or 1% is a significant cost. And so for us to offset that, you know, we're going to have to really have a candid conversation around what does 1% versus 2% look like when the cost impact and the cut is going to have to be significant because of just how big we are. And so I think what's going to end up happening, this is where the conversation is going to come, I think, in the next several weeks, is climate and culture, incredibly important. Like, we cannot operate and be a version that I think, the version of the AIC we need to be in order to really improve student outcomes and be aligned with their values unless we protect climate and culture. And we know compensation is a part of that, but not the only thing. And so the question is going to become, okay, well, if there's an increase in compensation by X percent and there's a large dollar amount tied to it because we're just a large organization, but then the COT offset, you know, ends up being 10 different things, you know, with all different impacts, you know, I think that's really where it's going to come, because 1% versus 8 or 9 million, it's going to be a challenge for us to get through that. So I think what we can do is kind of lay the framework for that conversation. And I think the next question that you'll have will help us define what are the options that we can even consider for that discussion, right? Because if it's not in those bullets in the next slide, then I wouldn't expect to bring that to the board, if that makes any sense. So I don't know if that's a good leading question to the third question, or a good segue to the third question, but it's almost like those three things, if there's consensus around that, it's really helpful for us. Because, I mean, we can almost like point back to it already. It should be either a known cost or a cost that's tied to our scorecard or one that's been identified in an existing initiative.
Thank you. Did all the trustees get a chance to speak on that second slide?
I just agree with everything that's being said.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. All right, so do you have what you need from us then on
On
slides
slide
1
two,
and 2?
on slide 2, yes.
Okay, and 1. Right?
And 1, yes.
And
Oh, yeah,
Okay,
one
good.
is
We're
already.
making progress. Trustee Boswell, was there anything you wanted to add as well?
I think really my only thought, a $30 million deficit is still quite significant. I think we're going to have some pretty painful cuts already to get to that point. And again, I want to think about all of it in the context of really what it means in the classroom and for our people, students and staff that serve our students. So a soft yes, I would say.
Thank you. All right, and the last question.
Yeah, on this one, I would less focus on the question now, because it says 30 million, because of the conversations we just had in the first 2 questions, and focus on these 3 bullets. Are there things that are not on here that you would expect to see from the administration, you know, as we go through this journey together? So if we were going to add, for instance, we would tie that back to a board priority, right? Or an existing initiative. Like those 2 things would likely go to the top, right? And make their way to the board. And any offsetting costs to address those 2, we would limit impact to the classroom. Outside of that, I think it would be difficult for us to get to a place where we'd present something to you that wasn't clearly defined in bullet 1 or 3. And I think that's what I'm trying to get some feedback on.
I just would want to clarify bullet point number 2, that when we're talking about limiting the classroom impact, we're talking about limiting the impact on student achievement and student outcomes. Knowing, I think everyone who has ever heard me knows that I strongly believe that you need to address adult situations in order to prepare them and support them in serving students. But I just want to be, I think there's just some clarity needed to say, we're talking about student, serving students, not just classrooms.
No, that's intent. We can definitely provide clarity around that or say it differently.
Any other trustees have comments?
Also because, and also because if we're approaching through an equity framework, some classrooms might be impacted in a way that other classrooms aren't, right? So there may be certain, offerings that aren't available everywhere that may have to be examined in order to provide fundamental things that are going to address outcomes for all students elsewhere. And so I just don't want to tie our hands to say that, that it's really about our priority student outcomes is the golden egg here.
Thank you. Any other trustees have comments on those 3 bullets? I think the only one I might add would be, and I'm sorry, I'm a visual person, I need to see the list again, would be something around, there, and I already mentioned this to you, Superintendent
Promotion.
Segura, is, show us some evidence. If you bring something to us about, I know this is a discussion we had last year about, like, if we decide to increase compensation for teachers that serve in a certain setting, it would be really helpful to see that you all have done research that would support that. And so, like, I would just ask if there's things that you bring to us that has, it should have some, it doesn't have to be like academic peer review, but, if we have research within our district or, something that we can be like, okay, this is clearly the way to go, then
Supplement
that's super, it's gonna make it just go down much easier, I think, for our public and probably for some of us on the dais as well. Trustee Boswell.
I want to second the evidence. I think every investment and every cut, we really need that why beneath it. Kind of why and what does it mean? What do we believe will happen as a result? So I think that is the tighter our budget gets, the more essential that conversation is. And I think the second thing is that list of initiatives, I believe enrollment is one of those. I think that is a source of revenue for us as our enrollment drops, our funds go down. If we are fortunate enough to attract more students to the district, our funding goes up. We want to be really sure that enrollment is a piece of it. And really want to think hard about attendance and what that means for our funding and our student achievement, and whether that should be something we're considering as well.
Yeah, I think absolutely we will provide that supporting document and logic. I do want to also communicate to the board that there will be kind of reasonableness tied to some of these assumptions. And the reason that I ask that is because there have been conversations that I've been a part of where, I get asked, Matthias, can we just, increase ADA to, 96%? And I, or which would equate to, what is it, every 1% is $4 million?
4.5.
4.5. And so certainly, I would love to do that, but I also recognize that to do that and to incorporate that into our budget would be difficult. So if I came forward with like, hey, I think that this cost would offset and yield a 1% increase, like I would want the board to kind of understand that we arrived at that percent through like a thoughtful process of what is likely to be the case if we invest or if we approach it this way. Because I think it's sometimes hard to say, well, why not just make it 2% or 3%? And then all of a sudden, 9 months from now, we're really struggling with the reality that was never the case, right? And we were deficit. So to Trustee Boswell's point in question, yes, we will absolutely provide kind of not only the backup, but also kind of the logic behind why that recommendation is coming forward. But also I want you all to know that we're also going to be thinking about, like, execution wise, is this reality, and can we do this in year one versus year two, and what that buildup might be, just because that thing needs to be part of the conversation as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I would like to say, I expect that approach and I appreciate that approach. I think it's exactly the right approach. We can't promise things we can't deliver. We need backup for what we believe. And I appreciate that very much. And if we do better than we think we can, that's beautiful. But I would rather under promise and over deliver than the opposite and get ourselves in a bad situation. So thank you.
So anyone else? Last comment?
Last comment.
Lee Chu.
So when we're talking about our board priorities, which we are creating and that are, required to be very narrowly focused on STAR scores and student achievement scores, some of the things that go into achievement can be invisible until they're removed. And we don't, we remove so much that we don't know what's impacting and hurting our students. Where, we might have a student who's the fine arts class increases their confidence so that they can read. And, all of our kiddos need that time, in physical education to get that break. Because if just increasing reading minutes and math minutes was enough, we would already, I worked at Pierce Middle School, and those kids were in math more than any other kids in this district and had fewer electives and other extracurricular opportunities than any kids in this district. So if that worked, we would already be at equity.
Amen to that. Good point. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you. Chief Ramos, do you have any thoughts that you want to share after listening to us talk?
Well, I think we were going to touch on copper pennies. I didn't know if you just
that's
wanted
right.
to.
I forgot. Yes, obviously. Yes.
There's no threat. Well, I was just going to, okay, we don't have to, but I mean,
we can.
If you want to, I think we could do like a little, 2, 3, keep an eye on.
I think it was really high level, just kind of what it is. I think folks have confusion around like what a golden penny is, copper penny, and then I think we come back with the more involved conversation. Does that sound okay?
That sounds great.
Yes, that's perfect.
So school districts, as part of their tax rates, we have what's called the golden pennies. We have 8 golden pennies available to us. Currently, we're accessing 7.9 cents of those 8 cents. Those golden pennies are not subject to recapture. So basically, when we tax using the 8 golden pennies, which we currently do, we maximize state funding. In addition to that, school districts also have available what's called copper pennies. In order to access those pennies, we would have to have a voter-approved tax ratification election. We have up to 9 copper pennies available to us. Just to give an estimate of what 9 copper pennies would bring the district, that would generate between $44 to $46 million next year if we were to have an election and it would be successful. So that is a tool, an opportunity that districts have throughout the state. There are several urban districts that have already accessed their copper pennies. And so if we choose to continue this conversation, we can bring that data for the board to see.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Chief. All right. So I think we can move on. And I would ask also, we have a couple trustees missing. It'll be really helpful to get their feedback on those 3 questions as well. So thank you. All right. Great job.
Thank you, Ed.
Okay, this ends the section on the information reports from the administration. So at this time, we are going to move into the preview. I do want to just take a moment, a point of privilege. So I feel like, so earlier when I gave feedback on the board monitoring report, I just want to say part of that was I should own some of that because I did not notice the the little on track when I reviewed the documents when we're talking about the board monitoring. So that was really on me. It wasn't even on you. It was on me, and I should have seen that and given you that feedback. So my apologies. The staff did a fantastic job with that presentation. But anyway, so at this time, we will now move into the preview of the agenda items that will be considered for a vote at the next regular board meeting on March 28th. AISD staff is available to answer any questions from tonight's preview. So we will begin tonight with item 7, which is the agenda preview for upcoming academics and curriculum items. So trustees, are there any questions on these items? Item 7.
I actually don't have I have a question, not about the items, but of Dr. Reach. It's gonna help us. So we have our calendar, just to clarify. So we have our calendar in which we can ask questions for information session. And because we have the same, I'm trying to make sure that we do have another window, right? Before the 28th.
That's correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure, so I don't have to ask my questions now.
But we do welcome your questions in case it helps us prepare for the next meeting.
I'll do it really soon.
Understood.
Thank you. All right, so next we have Section 8, Board Administration. So trustees, are there any questions on these items? All right, we will move on then to Section 9, Business and Finance. Any questions there? All right, okay. Next is Section 10, Facilities. So trustees, are there any questions on these items? Okay. Next, we've got Section 11, Human Resources. Trustees, any questions? Okay. And that's the whole agenda preview. So thank you all very much. This will end our regular agenda preview. I hope everybody has, oh, go ahead, Trustee Zapata.
So I have a question. We had a caller that called in and said that there was an item for our March, I thought it was the 28th, he said, that was going to be requesting a name change. Is that?
He was referring to a CAC meeting at the school.
Oh, I see. Okay.
On the 20th, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, so that, yes. All right, so thank you all very much. This will end our regular agenda preview. So we will now recess the open meeting at 8:53 p.m. And move into executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code sections 551.074, 551.072, 551.073, 551.087, 551.076, 551.081, and 551.071. And when we are finished with the exec session, we will briefly return to the open session to formally adjourn the meeting. The adjournment will be recorded and be included in all replays of tonight's meeting. I hope everyone has a wonderful and well-deserved spring break. So thank you so much for joining us, and have a great evening. Thank you. All right, so we are now reconvened in the open meeting at 11:44 p.m. Trustee Kaufman, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Having a motion by Trustee Kaufman and a second by Trustee Zapata to adjourn, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. The motion passes unanimously. This meeting is adjourned at 11:45 p.m. Thank you. Happy spring break.